bigger trouble than I think anyone thought. That the campaign's not doing well, and when you look at it, you kind of go, yeah, the campaign's in trouble. He was at the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association today to do this press conference. Now, could you be on any friendlier territory? Could you be on any friendlier turf than the Manufacturers Association, who basically bankrolls the Republican Party? They're the home of the Commonwealth Foundation, the right-wing Tea Party think tank. They're the home of basically where most of the funding funnels through to the GOP. So it's not surprising that the lieutenant governor would be the guy that they would trot out, hoping that some tough language would inspire the base, because evidently Corbett's just not doing it. When you're down by 25 points and you're an incumbent, you've got some problems. So you've got to reach deep into the bag of tricks, and you got to pull the guy out. You got to bring in the farm team. Let's go to the minors and see if we can get the great hope. Yeah, he said that the reason that he's trying to say that the administration has increased spending on education. And he's trying to say that, it's a lie that we took $1 billion. They cut $1 billion from education. The first year they took that out. And it didn't get put back the second year. It didn't get put back the third year. So you're talking about $3 billion out of education, $1 billion each year. Even if they left it even, you're still talking about that initial $1 billion is gone. So when you have 20,000 education professionals out of jobs, when you see taxes being raised in every community across the Commonwealth because school boards are left in this untenable position that either they cut courses, they make class sizes much bigger, or they try and raise taxes a little bit to try and mitigate some of the negative effects of the Corbett decision. And look, this is his decision. He did this. Regardless of what you want to say, this was his move. I loved what Khalid said, though. He goes, because he's trying to fight back on this, saying, well, that was money that came in from the federal government, and all of this stuff. He said that, I love this. I love this. It almost reminds me of the woman from Harrisburg who said, right when she became a city council person, that her job was to help put a more positive spin on the negative things that they do. I thought that was brilliant. This isn't to that level, but he's trying. He said the whole reason that they didn't get their side eyes, they're busy. They're doing their job, they're working, and they didn't have time to explain what they were doing. They didn't have time to tell their constituents what the hell they were. Didn't have the time. Sorry, we're busy. We had that swimming pool in our backyard that got fixed. They didn't fix it during the Rendell years, but they fixed it during the Cawley year because we needed maybe in Cawley's defense, maybe in the governor's defense, they fixed the swimming pool at the lieutenant governor's mansion because they were going to sell it. Maybe that's it. I mean, you can't sell a house with a broken swimming pool, right? Although my neighbors, they bought a house with a broken swimming pool and they just filled it in. Didn't want it. So I don't know. You just tell me, what do you think? Can you sell a house with a broken swimming pool, or do you have to fix it? Regardless, I don't think that was the purpose. Because where's he been for 3.5 years? So now when the campaign is really in a spiral down, they pull Cawley out to talk about this ad that a coalition of Democratic governors, the Democratic Governors Association and a number of labor groups have put together to highlight the fact that this governor on education has been an abysmal failure. Honestly, there's nothing more than you can say about it. They've continued to push these charter schools. They've continued to push for, even if you want to say just flatline funding, even if you buy their cockamamie excuses, even if you buy that, you're still talking about flat funding education while the costs of everything are going up, while the pension crisis that you've allowed to fester because you've done nothing, and in fact actually wanted to make it worse, continues. Because, again, you controlling everything still can't get anything done. And as I'm watching this, I'm fixated on the podium that Colley is standing behind, which is a sign of, with the state of Pennsylvania in it. They got the Commonwealth right there, with property tax relief through pension reform. Corbett Colley, 2014. And of course, Scott Wagner, the Tea Party senator in the back, the trash man in the back, pimping pension reform as well. And what is their version of pension reform? I love this, because before, if you remember, it was liquor. We're gonna sell off the liquor stores to pay for the pensions, right? Easy stuff. Easy, like my 5-year-old says, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Beautiful. Didn't actually work because it was a bad idea, and it didn't. The numbers weren't even close to anywhere where they were possibly going to do what they were supposed to do. So, we're going to hold this, and we're going to do this, and all in all, here we are, nothing getting done. We're months, a couple of years down the road, nothing getting done. The pension system, we have a small problem. There's a problem, and with some reasonable fixes, could not be a problem. But here we've had 3.5 years of dysfunction, of pointing the fingers at themselves while claiming it's someone else, and still nothing's getting done. Now we're going to pit homeowners through the guise of potentially getting some variance of tax relief on our property taxes. If only we go and we screw those teachers and those state workers. That's the latest scheme. And you kind of got to love it. You kind of got to like the idea that they're masterful at pitting people, groups against one another. And the question that I have is it going to work? Will people look at Corbett and say, oh yeah, there's a guy who cares about education, even though he has cut $1 billion from education each of the last 3 years? That you have in excess of 20,000 teacher layoffs? That property tax, and I find this to be one of the more ironic. He's claiming that if we just steal from the teachers and the public sector workers, we'll get property tax relief, even though the cuts to education that we are trying to steal from the teachers are what's causing your property taxes to go up. I don't know. Will we buy it? Will the voting public buy it? Are the Republicans so ingrained in flipping that lever? I'm a Republican, even though he's a bad guy, he's still my guy. Are we that ingrained? Are we stuck there, do you think? Because I got to tell you, I'm worried. I'm worried that we are. Because what we've done in this Commonwealth is we've really stuck it to property tax people like me, people like you, folks who own homes. Because every school district is scurrying, looking for money to keep the lights on, to keep classes at a reasonable size, and not to cut stuff. That's one of the things that worries me. My kids are in the heart of at the beginning, and I got 2 at the beginning and 1, almost half. What's 3-4 years down the road going to look like? And then what about their children? We've got some serious problems, and I got to be honest. When a guy comes out, and stop and think about this for a minute, when they bring in the B team, Jim Colley, and his first club out of the bag is, we didn't tell you about any of this stuff because we were busy. Is that the guy you want? I don't think so. So I'm hoping come November, both Corbett and Colley find themselves on the unemployment line. Maybe they could just go out and.
But there are a couple things.
Get a couple of things, right?
Number one, you would have to have an alarm clock. And you would have to be able to get out of bed. You would be able to have to pass a drug test, and you would have to have some work ethic.
There you go. I wonder if Colley can pass a drug test. Interesting question. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
And take your money. All they want to do is add up and take your money. All they want to do is add up and take your money. All they want to do is
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
It's time for the world in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the UN. On yesterday's broadcast, I featured a quote from UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon that UN staff were among the dead when a UN-operated school in Gaza was shelled. Today, the UN walked that claim back. 15 civilians were indeed killed in the attack, but UN staff were not among them. After extensive negotiations between U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, Ban Ki-moon, Egypt's foreign minister, and the head of the Arab League, a ceasefire deal to end the 18-day Israeli-Palestinian crisis is reportedly close at hand. According to preliminary sketches of the deal, a week-long temporary ceasefire is on the table, and both parties to the conflict would receive a meaningful concession. For Israel, that could include the ability to continue ground operations near the Israeli-Gaza border in a search for illegal tunnels. To address a major Palestinian grievance, Egypt would reportedly end the blockade of Gaza that's been in place since 2007. Moving around the world before we let the week slip away, a change of parliamentary leadership in Ukraine as Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk resigns. According to Ukrainian officials and Yatsenyuk himself, the move was a sign of the strength of the current pro-EU government, since the interim prime minister had long promised to step aside when the time was right, so that Ukrainians could go to the polls and elect their members of parliament from scratch. And finally, there are no survivors of a jet crash in the African nation of Mali yesterday. The Spanish-operated Swift Air flight was carrying 116 people aboard. Foul play is not suspected, but the crash was the third for a commercial airliner in 7 days, after a Malaysian Airlines jet was shot down in Ukraine last week, and a Trans-Asia Airlines jet went down in Taiwan on Wednesday. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm John Kerr. Fox News misleadingly attacked the findings of a report from the U.S. Department of Agriculture on quality control in the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, previously known as food stamps. Fox and Friends co-hosts Brian Kilmeade and Steve Doocy were eager to frame the report in a negative light.
New report out this morning that the government is overpaying on food stamps by about $2 billion. This is overall food stamp spending is up 115% under President Obama.
Can the administration really be trusted with more money?
Fox Business anchor Stuart Varney chastised the Department of Agriculture for labeling the food stamp payment error rate excellent.
The error rate, 3.42%. Since when has that been good?
But the truth is, the USDA report confirms that its error rate is the lowest it's been in the history of the program. In fact, error rates were much higher during the Bush administration, before the recession pushed millions of Americans into poverty, boosting participation in nutritional assistance programs. For more on this and other stories, visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania
happy! Standing tall against the multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
Decent days, equality is in play. Workers should organize haste. Have the phone in your workplace. Work with your manager face to face. Let's go! It's starting again. The change, a new legacy. Support the EFCA. Let's go! It's starting again.
And welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. A new labor age, potentially, not with the Employee Free Choice Act, though, which I had hoped at the beginning of the Obama administration, at the beginning of his term in 2009, that the Employee Free Choice Act could have been a reality. Unfortunately, now just a distant memory. But this past weekend, something I think historic as you saw some 1,300 to 1,500 fast food workers from across the country converge on Chicago, Illinois, a little suburb just outside of Chicago, to have the first ever fast food workers convention, where they unanimously decided that they were going to do whatever it took, even if that means striking and civil disobedience, to win a $15 an hour wage and the right to respect and dignity on the job through a union. And here to talk a little bit about it, Ashana Osborne. She was at this historic convention. Ashana, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me, what was this like? What was the atmosphere here in this convention of first ever of its kind of some 1,500 fast food workers?
It was so remarkable. So much power and so much inspiration was within that convention. It was so remarkable. I know that we are going to win this.
I saw reports, in the mainstream media, and I can't imagine that the fast food franchises are all that thrilled to see their workforce, who they've always seemed to have under their thumb, now kind of breaking free. Right.
And it's like the more that us, the public, grow stronger, the more that their walls are soon to break.
And, some of the things, tell me about some of the conditions, tell our listeners some of the things that you deal with, and that the other folks there at the convention, as well as the people who weren't able to attend, what kind of conditions do they endure working in the fast food industry?
Well, we don't get respect. We get burned and injured, and the companies don't want to help take care of us because they don't want to go into their bonus money. Right. Going into their bonus money, they have to go and take care of us with their medical insurance or what have you, and they don't want to do that. So it's like when we get injured or burned, they tell us go back to work and put some cream or some butter on it. You'll be okay.
Yeah, you'll be just fine.
Right.
Now, this isn't an industry that's struggling. In fact, I had seen reports not too long ago that the fast food industry, it takes in about $7 billion in profit, not to mention billions of dollars in taxpayer assistance. So this is an industry that could conceivably pay a $15 an hour wage.
Right, they can afford it. Every employer wage that we've seen this weekend at the convention, they all make at least $10 million. And make at least $9,000 an hour. They can afford it. We only make $7.25 an hour, and we are the ones who are frying the slabs and flipping the burgers and getting burnt from the grease and dealing with mean customers or what have you all day. They can afford to up our wage.
Yeah, that's one thing I could never. I worked at a Wendy's for a couple of months back when I just got out of high school, and that was the thing. I actually got fired for throwing a Frosty at one of the Geez, I shouldn't have said that. She hit me with ketchup French fries, and I hit her back with a Frosty. It wasn't my industry, so I don't know how you guys do it.
Right. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to deal with it. But we have to do it, so we can provide for our kids and pay our bills. This is what we have to go through. And they think that this is a starter job and it's not supposed to be a career, right, and that we're a bunch of teenagers or what have you just working to get chump change. No, this is what we really are working for a better pay, for respect, and stop living in poverty.
Because I was going to ask you about that. How many of the people there were like me when I worked at a fast food restaurant, just a pimply-faced teenager, biding his time till either to go to college or for the school year to end? How many of those did you have?
Everyone. It's basically everyone. Everyone is really working to really sustain their lifestyle. It's not just to be working to go out on Saturday night or just working to go get the latest new pair of tennis shoes. We are really working because we need this money.
And to support your families. And the other part of this that bothers me, Ashana, and this is the thing that I think that everyone who pays taxes should wake up and realize that the taxpayer subsidizes these industries that maintain these low-wage workforces through food stamps and other programs that the right wing demonizes incessantly. But we support this. And if you're a free market type person, you should be saying, you know what, instead of subsidizing this stuff, maybe we should make those industries, just a thought, maybe we should make those industries pay what they should be paying.
Right, because it's like they always, are on our backs about government assistance and we're on food stamps and we have cash assistance. If it was that we would get paid more, we would delay ourselves more off of government assistance and we'd be able to provide our own assistance from our work.
So let me ask you about this. Let me ask you about the civil disobedience part. because they were saying, look, we want to engage. We may have to. We may have to go on strike. We may have to engage in civil disobedience. What is that?
That is sitting down and taking their arrest. What we did on May 21st at the shareholders meeting for McDonald's, me and 138 other workers, we went on McDonald's headquarters property. We sat down, even though the cops told us more than 3 times, you're trespassing. If you don't remove, you're going to get arrested. We were willing to sit down, take an arrest, and show McDonald's and other corporations that we are not playing. We will do whatever it takes to win this fight in the union, and we will not stop until we do win. I am willing to continue to get arrested wherever I have to, whatever I have to do, and we will keep doing it. And I want to motivate the whole public who's hearing me right now that we need support. And if you are willing to take a civil disobedience with us, with me, then come on and let's do it, and we will win this fight.
Well, we're with you here at the Rick Smith Show, and everything we can do, we will help you with. The one thing that you highlight, and this is not new, Ashona. I mean, this is how my grandparents built the largest middle class in the history of civilization. This is how generations of workers in the past, through folding their arms and sitting down, said we are not going to take the bad conditions, and we're going to make industries livable wages. So you look at factory jobs that were just as bad, actually worse, if you will, than most jobs we have today. They made those middle class jobs. How? Just like you're talking about, folding your arms and sitting down.
Right. And it was such a remarkable thing for me to do that. I know at first I was scared, I'm going to jail, what's going to happen. But when I did it, and I didn't know that the lady that I was standing next to the whole time was the president of the union, Miss Mary Kay, and I had an honor to take an arrest with her. And it was so inspiring to say that I had got arrested on the behest of fighting for something I believe in, fighting for something that is really going to take over, and my sons want to learn from this and take part of this too when he gets older. And it's not going to only help me, but help other generations soon to come.
Right. Well, like they say, have you been to jail for justice? And it sounds to me like you're standing up and fighting for justice.
Yes, of course, and I won't stop.
So where does it go from here? You had this convention. Obviously, you're going to have a strategy of moving forward. If someone wants to get involved, I'm not a fast food worker, but I want to help, and I know other people who feel the same way. How can we? What do we do?
Right. Well, from the convention center, all of the cities that were there, we all came together and made a plan that we are going to take whatever we learned from the convention and take it home, which was we're going to organize, have committees, have meetings, take days out to go out to certain stores and try to organize and sign up with cards. And if anyone's still interested, even in your city, you could contact me on Facebook. Ashona Denise is my name, and I'm willing to, go through whatever I have to do to help you wherever state you're at. I'm sure I could get a hold of your organizer or whoever's involved in that state. We will get you involved, and we will need you to come on and help us fight.
Now, this is really truly a grassroots operation. You yourself, you're a fast food worker, right?
Yes, I am. I work at Wendy's.
So you're out there saying, you know what, I'm going to take time off of, from my regular life, from whatever I had to go out and make not only my life and my kids' lives better, but other people's lives better as well.
Of course. And it's like whoever wants to be involved, I am so willing to help them get involved, to help them get organized, and help them organize other people as well.
So as you're out talking to other fast food workers, what responses are you getting from folks?
Some responses, I'm not going to lie, they're kind of heavy and they're intimidated and they're scared because, managers want to say whatever they can to try to get them against us. But other responses, they're like, oh, girl, why didn't you come tell me? Or why didn't I know? Or, yeah, sign me up right away. I could get my friends and family to sign up. It's just whenever people are like so astonished and so happy to want to get involved, that just makes me feel like we're just that much closer to winning this. Yeah. Every single card that I have a person sign, that is one step closer to our victory.
In the years that I did organizing, I remember the people who were most adamantly opposed. Then, at a certain point, they get that sense of empowerment, that sense of that fear lifted from their back, and they themselves became, like super organizers. They were generally the ones who were out in front because once that fear. Because look, I really understand what people feel like in your industry because for so long they've been abused and exploited and oppressed and all of that, and nobody gave a rat's behind. Now someone may be listening.
Right. And I don't want no workers to feel like you're in a replacement, because managers seem to do that. They seem to think, well, since you're trying to express your voice, I could easily replace you. What people don't understand, once you get with the union, you're protected.
Yep.
And they cannot retaliate or do any type of harassment. Once you are with the union, you are protected, and we will fight with you to help you keep your job and to keep organizing the way you want to.
And that's a dirty little secret that the managerial class doesn't want you to, the ownership class doesn't want you to know. That once you say, I'm acting in a concerted effort to organize and to make my lives and the lives of my coworkers better, none of the punitive stuff that they claim they can do can happen.
Right. But once you're with the union, you are protected.
So from here, what's the next step? Because you're going to do the organizing as a group. What's the next step?
The next step, well, I believe that there is a action next month in August back in Chicago, and hopefully when we go back there, we will have a larger amount of numbers of people. And until then, we're just going to keep organizing, get as many people as we can signed up. We're going to do all we can, travel to your city, people on Facebook and in the media, Ubu and Skype with one another. And we keep track of what everyone's doing. We plan things. We have meetings. We write down what we're going to do. We try to relate ourselves to how the civil rights movements happen, what we could learn from them, what we could apply from their movements to our movement. And Martin Luther King said, a man can't bend his back unless I'm so sorry. What is it? It was a great quote. He said, a man can't bend his back unless a man... Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot that quote. But a Reverend Barber said it this weekend, and it was so inspiring that it touched a lot of people's hearts.
Well, I'll find it for you.
Okay.
Unless it's bent, I believe, is the a man can't ride your back unless it's bent.
Right. Yes, that was it. There you go.
There you go.
That is it.
Shauna, as this continues down the road, I would love to have you back and give us updates and fill us in on what's going on, because I think what you're doing is so vitally important to the future of the working class of this country and for my kids' future as well, and I give you nothing but credit for it.
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm willing to, any type of interview, anything you need me to do, I'm always willing to get my story and try to reach other people out there as well and inspire them to get with this movement.
Keep up the fight, Shauna. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. This is The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Citizens united, I was excited. When the kids are united, they can never be divided. Yesterday, there's a brand new chef today.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
The production is going to increase. Our safety standards have to increase with it.
New rules for explosive oil trains. Big win in Maine over big tar sands oil. Plus,
and on the subject of climate change, U.S. citizens reveal themselves to be more divided than any other nation.
We're number one. America leads the world in global warming denial.
Thanks, Rush. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It's ironically humorous.
Yes, it is, Rush. In just the same way that the idea of thousands, if not millions of people dying from droughts, fires, storms, floods is ironically hysterical. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air today, breaking news out of Virginia. 2 people were killed and at least 26 others injured on Thursday after a powerful storm swept through a campground filled with vacationing families. The storm brought heavy rains, fierce winds, baseball-sized hail, snapped towering trees, sending some crashing onto tents, campers, and cars at the Cherrystone Family Camping Resort in Cape Charles, north of Norfolk. One of the campers, Jordan Burtock, tweeted, "Just lived through a tornado. Children are missing. People are dead. Trees are down. Campers are flipped.
Yes, it was a really stunning, powerful storm that came up so quickly. The National Weather Service had not yet even issued a tornado watch. They did issue a tornado warning, but they only had about 20 minutes of warning before it hit.
So what kind of cheery news do you have for us today, Des?
Well, let's see. How about new rules for oil trains?
Sounds like fun.
After a rash of oil train explosions amid the U.S. drilling boom, including one in Canada last year that incinerated the downtown of Lac-Mégantic and killed 47 people, well, now the Obama administration has proposed new rules to phase out within 2 years a type of rail car that is prone to rupture. Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox defended the proposed rules in an interview with PBS NewsHour.
Crude by rail shipments have increased from 2008 for 9,500 carloads to more than 415,000 carloads, a 4,000% increase. So the production is going to increase. Our safety standards have to increase with it.
The proposed rules include new speed limits and flammability testing for North Dakota's Bakken shale oil. Now, while the railroad industry is receptive to the new rules, the oil industry is not, because it will raise their shipping costs. Ron Ness of the North Dakota Petroleum Council seems to think the danger is overstated.
At 99.7% of the time, rail movements get to their destination safely.
Oh, well, that's good. 99.7% of the time. Why complain? Rachel Maddow spoke about the lobbying against new rules for these oil bomb trains just a few months ago.
Lobbyists for the rail car manufacturers said the same thing. These rail cars are getting a bad rap. They're totally fine. We swear we love explosions.
Score one for the little guy over big oil. The City Council of tiny South Portland, Maine has voted to block the use of its port to load and ship heavy tar sands oil from Canada over concerns about pollution, oil spills, and climate change. The ban passed despite a massive oil industry PR campaign that reportedly spent over $700,000 in advertising in the small town of just 25,000 people and even bussed in supporters to City Council meetings. The American Petroleum Institute is threatening to sue to force the town to allow the shipments.
Of course they are. This is the case where they're trying to figure out how to get these tar sands out of the country. With Keystone XL potentially being blocked, they're looking at reversing a pipeline which currently goes from the East Coast up to Canada. They want to reverse it to send the tar sands out through Maine, and that's what the town is trying to block.
Yep. We're number one. Americans lead the world in global warming denial. In a broad survey of public opinion conducted by Ipsos Mori across 20 developed countries, the United States is the most climate change denying nation on the planet, with the highest percentage of people who reject the global scientific consensus that humans are causing dangerous global warming. Naturally, right-wing radio host Rush Limbaugh takes credit for dumbing down America.
Why would the U.S. be the leading nation with the highest amount of doubt about the conventional wisdom of climate? Why do you think that would be? I think that's exactly right. Me.
Yes, you, Rush. More specifically, the fact that America has more corporate radio than any other nation in the world, I suspect. So, of course, we hear more of the corporate lies from the fossil fuel industry through their mouthpiece known as Rush Limbaugh.
There are signs of change, however. A new Media Matters analysis finds that in the first 6 months of this year, the network news shows covered climate change as much as they did in the last 4 years combined.
That would be good news as long as you don't pay attention to how little they covered it in the last 4 years combined.
Trying to look for the good news.
Ever the optimist. For much more on those stories and the ones we couldn't get to in this busy news day, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help keep the Green News Report on your public airwaves. Someone's got to fight against Rush. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
What do you say about his companies? What do you say about society?
Standing tall against a multinational corporate agenda. The Rick Smith Show.
All the things you want are real. You have you to complete, and there is no deal.
The thing that gets me, and you listen to Sean Osborne, and this is the battle my grandparents fought. This is the battle that generations of workers of the past fought poor conditions, low wages, no respect, no dignity, no rights, no security, none of that stuff on the job. Very at will, very you can work today, well, you're fired tomorrow. In fact, in the past, wages changed by day, which is where the business class really wants to take us. If you took economics, just the 100 level, talk about wage and price stickiness, they'd love to do away with that for workers. Where you come in every day and go, well, the rate today is 59 cents less than it was yesterday. Take it or leave it. That's really where they want to take us back to. And if you listen to the rhetoric of the business class, that's where they want to go back to. And it's interesting to me that you had this historic event in Chicago, and to me, Chicago is the perfect place for this. I mean, you go back, really kind of the birth of the American labor movement as well, with Haymarket and the Pullman strike, and all of the meat packing district, and all of the labor history that is there. To have it in Chicago, to me, is a symbol of hope. Is one of these things where maybe we see this rebirth. And I found it interesting that when I looked at The Hill, the magazine, the online news source, The Hill, maybe it's just me, but there's my mind goes in this realm that there's things that are planned out. Nothing just happens. Coincidence, not so much. Things follow kind of a path of reasoning. Things pop up at certain times, not by chance. So when you're reading about this historic event in Chicago, where some 1,500 fast food workers from across this country took money out of their own pockets to get on a bus and travel to staying 4, 6, 8, 10 people to a room. It's not surprising to me that the Hill, who is kind of a right-wing kind of, they try to be center, and you got to give them credit for at least pretending like they're going to try, but they're basically a business rag because they're selling ads like everybody else. So they have this headline, the big headline: business groups alarmed by rise of micro unions in workplace. I'm going, really? This is a big problem. This needs to be on the front page of your online paper. Really? Business groups alarmed by rise of micro unions. And look, in the private sector, they have virtually destroyed organized labor. You're talking about 6%. That's almost as many people were in the unions when it was illegal. And yet they, out of both sides of their mouths, say, oh, big bad unions need to be destroyed. And on the other side, well, they're weak and ineffective. They can't do anything for you. And I go, well, which is it? So the case that they're talking about in this article, the National Labor Relations Board recognized for the first time this so-called micro-union specialty health care. They're a rehabilitation center of a group, a bunch of these nursing assistants who wanted to organize. They wanted to say, we have certain things that are our own that we do specifically that we should organize over. So in 2011, the National Labor Relations Board first recognized this micro union kind of thing. This kind of reminds me of back in the old days, but they're giving it a new name. Now a small group of employees at Macy's, they have been given permission to organize. Just a small group. And this is an interesting concept. I go back to, in the 40s and the 50s when every craft, every trade had its own union. The insurance agents had their own union. Cigar makers had their own union. Shoe shine people had their own union. Paper boys even at one point had their own union. Because there are specific things to each of those jobs that should be negotiated, and I'm okay with that. I think that's a good thing, not just for the workers, but for the employer as well, because you get it down on paper. This is what we both. These are the contracts that we both expect what out of each other. I think it's a good thing. The business class, not so much. They're scared. They're scared. And they should be. They claim it's going to be gerrymandering of the workplace. The guy who's they found a guy who owns a bunch of fast food joints. I guess he owns like 18 of them in Maryland and D.C. And they quoted him as saying, now they, as meaning the unions and the workers, they're going to target industries that traditionally were very difficult to unionize, which means that they were easily exploited and they were marginalized and they were easily exploited. Now there's this potential that fry cooks can say, you know what, we're going to have the fry cooks union. And that's going to be our job. Now, I love it as you go through the article, the one guy says, well, you know, we've always, I think it was the Restaurant Association or something like that. He goes and says, well, our customers, and now it's all customer based. Oh, we care about the customers. Our customers are used to walking up to our employees and asking them to solve a problem. Yeah. Like, here's the response. We don't want to have micro unions spring up. It would be a disaster because we don't want people walking up to our employees and our employees telling them that's not our job. And I'm going, really? I've never heard someone tell me that. I've said it's not. I've had people say that's not my job, but I can help you find somebody whose it is because I don't know what it is you want. I've heard that. This Hollywood makeup kind of, just like I've never really seen a Teamster with a baseball bat or a whole bunch of them. Hollywood used to do that all the time. I've never heard someone say, well, that's not my job and I don't care. I've heard people, it's not my job, but I'll help you find somebody who it is. In fact, I hear that quite often. But never, go pound sand. So to me, it's going to be interesting because, as people start gaining awareness, and I think all of this last ditch attack by corporate America, because they had labor where they wanted them. They were happy, really, honestly, they were happy negotiating a little bit better increases. They were happy staving off some of the attacks for the members that they had. They weren't doing a whole lot of organizing because it was really difficult and costly. They were okay, just trying to hold on. But this since Scott Walker forward, since the Koch brothers said, okay, time, we're going, now you put people into a corner. And now you're starting to see that organizing. And you're seeing people like Ashana Osborne, who, never had this in her mind before, never thought she was going to go to Chicago and participate in a huge convention. You're now going to start empowering people. And that has got to scare corporate America and Wall Street. When you have a generation that's saying, you know what, I've had enough of you know what, they're worried. And right, quick break, right back, stick around.
7, yeah, I go to work at night. I got no time for living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Have you noticed that the powers that be employ an entirely different standard for measuring the health of America's job market than they use for the stock market? They're currently telling us that the job market is improving. What do they mean? Simply that the economy is generating an increase in the number of jobs available for workers. But when they say the stock market is improving, they don't mean that the number of stocks available to investors is on the rise. Instead, they're measuring the price, the value of the stocks. And isn't value what really counts in both cases? As a worker, You don't merely want to know that 200,000 new jobs are on the market, but what they're worth. Do they pay living wages? Do they come with benefits? Are they just part-time and temporary? Do they include union rights? What are the working conditions, etc.? In other words, are these jobs or scams? So it's interesting that the recent news of job market improvement doesn't mention that of the 10 occupation categories projecting the greatest growth in the next 8 years, only one pays a middle-class wage. 4 pay barely above the poverty level, and 5 pay beneath it, including fast food workers, retail sales staff, health aides, and janitors. The job expected to have the highest number of openings is personal care aide, taking care of aging baby boomers in their houses or in nursing homes. The median salary of an aide is under $20,000. They enjoy no benefits, and about 40% of them must rely on food stamps and Medicaid to make ends meet. Plus, many are in the, quote, shadow economy, vulnerable to being cheated on their already miserly wages. This is Jim Hightower saying, to measure the job market by quantity with no regard for quality is to devalue workers themselves. Creating 200,000 new jobs is not a sign of economic health if each worker needs 2 or 3 of those jobs to patch together a bare-bones living.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Exposing GOP hypocrisy. The Rick Smith Show.
He's a crying. I want it all. I want it all. I want it all. And I want it now.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So Richard sent me an email. If you remember last week, we talked with Ray Goforth from Boeing about. Actually, we were talking about the trains in Chicago. That's a whole different email, the Boeing email. But he says the whole thing with the train cars is to save the Democratic Party, saving its behind. He says Rahm Emanuel is a anti-labor, filthy expletive. That expletive, SOB, was the point man under Clinton for NAFTA. If labor was able to sit across the table with that stain, bleep, labor should have reached across and choked the freaking breath right out of him. We need militant labor, not this get along crap. And you're right, Richard. And it's what I've been saying for the longest time. We need people who are going to stand up and say, you know what, no more. Going to cross their arms and sit down if they have to, like Ashana Osborne, who we talked to earlier, right there. Anyway, welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me like Richard did, rick@thericksmithshow.com. So Chamber of Commerce not happy with the National Labor Relations Board saying micro-unions are okay, so they're going to go out and get some politicians, some good anti-worker politicians. And it's not just the Republicans. It appears that the Chamber of Commerce is going to be endorsing, and this isn't in stone yet, but the most media reports are saying it's going to happen. They're going to the Chamber of Commerce is going to endorse Mary Landrieu, the Democratic senator from Louisiana. Now, that's telling me that they're feeling pretty good in the other races that they're going to be able to take back the Senate. And you always want to have one on the other side of the aisle in your hip pocket, right? So it'll be interesting to see if that happens. Because you always need a good corporate Democrat in the Senate, or 40 of them, which is kind of where we're at. Anyway, interesting story came out today, and as the Social Security Trust people, the trustees have come out with their report today. And there's a couple of ways I guess you can look at it. The first way is that the trust fund is growing. It has about the surplus is growing. It's about $2.8 trillion right now. It's expected to grow to $2.9 trillion around 2020. So we're seeing a little bit of growth. Now as you're looking down the road, there are some problems. We know that. And in fact, we've known that for a number of years, and yet we've got politicians who have done nothing. So again, I'm looking at the Hill, and the Hill caught my attention today. The headline, Medicare, Social Security head toward insolvency, just at a slower rate. So it's got everybody going, the end of the world's coming. It's going to insolvency. It's going to be bankrupt. Yeah, it's going to be bankrupt in 2030. You got 16 years to do something about it. Maybe 14, because I don't think anything gets done in these next 2. Nothing's been done in the last 5.5, 6, 7. Actually, go back to 2004. If you remember Bush going around with the filing cabinet saying it's all a bunch of IOUs. Remember that? See, I do. And still, they've done nothing to fix it. It's a lot of finger pointing. It's a lot of waving, but not any actual action. Now, the trustees' projection found that because of, and this is the other part of this, because of the Affordable Care Act, it's actually lost less money than they thought it would because of the cost of Medicare. Because healthcare spending has been falling, which is good. Now, what they're saying is it's going to be tapped out in 2033, and then we'll have some deficit spending. Now, you've got time, and we should be moving towards doing something, yet we're not. And I looked at, the story that I was reading earlier. It said in 2013, and this is one of those stats that just grabs me and says, we've got some real bizarre laws. In 2013, the federal government gave $137 billion in tax benefits to people to encourage them to save for retirement. And I'm not against the idea of saving for retirement. The problem is you got the top 10% of people in the country who have virtually all of the income. They drew some 3 times as much of the benefit as the people at the bottom 60%. So you've got these 10% up at the top who everything seems to gravitate to them to make them wealthier. And I'm like, instead of having all of these different incentives and all of these different things all over the place, why aren't we just strengthening Social Security? Why aren't we saying, instead of all these crummy 401k plans and all of these different things, how about we just strengthen the one? So that we say that, line in the sand, nobody lives in poverty. That when you go to retire, it's there every month, just as Social Security has been. But to guarantee that, instead of all of these different bizarre schemes that the right keeps popping up with, that the corporatists keep popping up with, that Wall Street keeps popping up with and saying, oh, hey, we can figure that out. Just kind of a thought. I mean, think about the 401k schemes that they rammed down our throats. When my grandparents were in the heart of their working lives, most workers had defined benefit pensions to where when they reached a certain age, after a certain number of years of service, they knew they were getting X amount of dollars, and that's what they planned their retirement on. Today, there's none of that. You'd be hard-pressed to find an employer that isn't a union employer that would have a defined benefit plan. And while we're looking at all this, you stop and you think about it here on the state level. They want to privatize the state pensions. Why? So that they can have the same wonders of the defined benefit that you and I have, or the defined contribution that you and I have, the 401k. Lots of fees. Amazing stuff to me. Let's take a quick break. Right back with Hour 2. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Public liberty, someday, somewhere. Today's empires, tomorrow's ashes.
Exposing that free trade is never free. The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
This is what a union looks like. Show some love. This is your union right here. Look around at your brothers and sisters. This is your union, all right?
About 1,000 fast food workers from cities nationwide gathered in Chicago for a Fight for 15 convention over the weekend. They decided to escalate their campaign for a $15 an hour minimum wage and a union. Ashana Osborne is from Pittsburgh.
I'm so pumped up. I know that we're going to win, and we're not going to stop fighting until we win. And just seeing everyone here supporting and ready to go fight and pumped up, I'm just so excited. This movement is about standing up and taking what's ours. We need respect, stop living in poverty, and earn what we deserve. Really, last time that we were here in May, I took an arrest to make sure that they know that we are taken serious. We are not playing, and I will get arrested again. I'll keep getting arrested until they hear us and take it serious and go with what we need.
Lena Germany is from Pennsylvania. She had a message for fast food corporate management.
Wendy's, Popeyes, KFC, anywhere. We all want to be treated fair. We don't want to feel like we're beneath nothing. In our training, you tell us our main thing is to make sure our customers feel special. We do that, but you as our bosses don't make us feel special. Make us feel like we are needed here. But we work our butts off for you. As long as we got our hope and our strength and our numbers, we're going to make it happen to where we get the respect we deserve.
My name is Melinda Topol. I'm a fast food worker from Kansas City, Missouri. When people stand up and fight for what they believe in, it gives other people the encourage to stand up and fight for what they've believed in. They've just been scared to do it. There's power in numbers. So if we all stand together, we're going to continue to fight and we're going to grow bigger.
My name is Daisha Mims, and I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm a single mother of 3. I receive government assistance, but I still don't make enough to cover my bills. I was actually the first person from my store that went the first 2 times. And the 3rd time, I actually got 9 other people, as well as a couple others to walk out to join the strike team.
Armando Dukes is from Atlanta.
I got a part of this because I work for the Burger King franchise. I've been there 6 years, and I'm making $7.35. I only got a 10-cent raise out of 6 years being there. So I'm trying to make it better not only for myself, but other folk that deserve this, that have been working hard for these companies and not getting the pay that they should. This is very important for society and people, lower class people that work. It's very important that we get this done no matter what. We got to keep going and trying to get it done.
We're ready to escalate the campaign because I don't think they heard us the first umpteen times we decided to walk out.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So for the last week and a half, we've been talking about this story in South Carolina where this woman went to work, sent her 9-year-old child to the park to play, and she was arrested. And immediately when it happened, I said, I guess my mother would have been a convicted felon because there were nights where she worked the night shift. That as a 7-8-year-old, I was sleeping home alone. There were all of these things that I go back to and go, how did this happen? How did we come to this time to where we're now locking working mothers up? It's insane to me. And here to talk a little bit about it and her piece, we're arresting poor mothers for our own failures. I've asked Bryce Colvert. She is she's the editor over at the economic policy website there, Think Progress, also a blogger for The Nation. Bryce, thanks for taking time for me.
Thanks for having me on.
I look at this story and I guess first and foremost, how have things changed this quickly from, I was a kid back in the 70s. How did things change from we've got latchkey kids to now we're locking mothers up for letting their kids go to the park?
Well, we've had a cultural shift around parenthood in general where we expect parents to be ever present. And what's interesting is this is happening at a time when, of course, parents are increasingly both in the workforce. Most families don't have a stay-at-home caregiver. The number of families that look like that is actually shrinking. But at the same time, we're expecting parents to do quite a lot, and it plays out in the numbers. If you look at how much time today's women spend on childcare, it's actually more than mothers spent in the 1960s, even though those same mothers today are also going into the workforce in much greater numbers and spending much more time doing that and bringing in income. Many families now rely on their income. So we really have placed a lot of demands on today's working mothers.
And, I look at this and I go, locking her up? Are you kidding me? It makes no sense to me on it, because now she's going to lose her job. I'm going to end up back on welfare. And I thought welfare reform back in '96 was supposed to help people get into the workforce and not be reliant on the taxpayer. I thought we were going to give people a helping hand.
Absolutely. That was the promise that was made. Bill Clinton, when he signed welfare reform into law in the 1990s, explicitly promised low-income mothers, if you go into the workforce and get a job and work, we will help you. He said, we'll take care of the supports you need, like health care, nutrition, and child care. And that promise of child care in particular has really been broken. Spending on child care assistance is at the lowest level since 2002, and the number of children who are served by those subsidies is at the lowest level since 1998. So those working moms have, by and large, gone into the workforce. Welfare now comes with work requirements. If you want that cash assistance, you have to look for a job or get a job, both of which usually require some child care to do. They have increased their hours in the workforce, and we have basically dropped the ball on our end.
But Bryce, wait a second. You've just confused me, because everything that I'm hearing from my corporate-controlled media friends is that welfare spending's never been higher. It's this lavish existence that we heap upon these people who are just out there pumping out units. Where am I to believe?
We have basically frozen the amount we spend on what we think of traditionally as welfare. Today it's called TANF. But we basically think of it as welfare, which is just cash assistance. It's not food stamps, it's not housing assistance. It's just cash for families who need some extra support to get by. That was what was reformed in the 1990s, and ever since then, the amount that we give to states to spend on people who need this kind of assistance has been frozen. It's lost a third of its value since then. And it's also reaching a lot fewer people, given that there's less out there and that there are so many more stringent requirements. In 1996, before reform was passed, it reached about 72% of poor families with children. Today, welfare reaches just 26% of poor families with children. That means about 3/4 of the poor families with kids who are trying to get by, who need some help, are not getting it.
And how many of these people are working poor? I mean, it's interesting that that the two people that you cite in your story, the woman from Arizona and the woman from South Carolina, both worked at McDonald's. And to me, then you throw it with this past weekend's big convention in Chicago, where fast food workers are saying, "Hey, we want to make a decent wage, not even really a good wage, just a decent wage." It kind of all meshes together for me.
Yeah, most of the people who are using these programs are the working poor. Like I said, they have very strict work requirements, so it's hard to get these benefits if you're not out in the workforce in some way. And we know that a lot of people who are in low-wage jobs at fast food restaurants, at Walmart, consume billions in public assistance spending every year. And that's a sign that people are going in, they're putting a day's work in, and they're coming home and they just don't have enough to support their families. So this equation just really looks unbalanced for them.
It is completely unbalanced. And, I go back to Mitt Romney's statement about the 47%, and these two women are part of the 47% that he was pointing his fingers at.
Yeah, these are women who are doing what we have asked them to do. Welfare reform says
Did we ask? Because I don't think we asked. I think we rammed this down their throats.
Welfare, we asked/forced women into the workplace, and I think a lot of people do want to work. I mean, I think what we're seeing in these situations where mothers are making really compromising decisions about where should they leave their children when they have no options, they want to be in the workforce. They want to feel the dignity and the independence of being able to go have a job and earn a living and provide for your family. I think nearly all Americans feel this way. It's whether or not you can find a job, it's whether or not you can get to that job, and child care just plays such a huge role for low-income moms, that if they can't get it, then they just have so few options, none of them very good.
Yeah, you're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Bryce Covert. She's economic policy editor over at Think Progress, also a blogger for The Nation magazine. We've got a link to her article, We're Arresting Poor Mothers for Our Future, for Our Failures, over at thericksmithshow.com. You know, Bryce, I go back to my childhood. My mother was a single mother in the 70s, and not a good time for single mothers. Didn't have a lot of those same programs. But, you know, I remember, you know, the heartache and the struggle. She would find a job, couldn't find childcare. There was this constant struggle. And I remember in '96 when all this was coming out, I said, the first thing that has to be addressed, and maybe the first jobs that you push people into, are taking care of people's children. Maybe setting something like that up would be a step in the right direction, and not just a 9 to 5, but a 24-hour clock, because my mother had numerous jobs that were overnight. That, you know, when I read this story, they'd have locked her up for.
Right. Well, that's the other thing, too, is that, you know, some mothers can rely on school when their kids are of the right age. But even that is tricky, because school is really, first of all, doesn't even look much like the 9 to 5 world. You know, it's usually something like 8 till 3 or 4. So you're still trying to find childcare, even if you have sort of a desk job that is the traditional hours. But a lot of people, particularly low-income people who are working these low-wage jobs, can't even rely on a schedule that looks like that. A lot of them have erratic scheduling where they don't even know what their hours are going to look like within weeks of when they have to work them. They'll get to work sometimes and be told to turn around and go home because there's not enough demand. They are working part-time shifts, late shifts, weird hours. All of that makes it so much harder to get childcare, even if you can find it, just to arrange it. So we also have to take that into consideration when we're thinking about how we help poor moms afford childcare and get to work.
So from a policy standpoint, and looking at what we should be doing, because, you know, I look at what's going on in Washington, and nothing, I can see nothing good coming out of Washington. But looking at this, how do we help make sure that that guarantee that Bill Clinton made is upheld, and what should we be doing to make sure that mothers who are trying to work and take care of their families and uphold their responsibilities on both ends aren't being locked up, and kids going to child services and all of these negative consequences that come out of it? Or is this us as a society needing to change and go back to when I was a kid, where, you know what, kids are home sometimes?
Well, I do think we need to relax a little bit about how we view parenting, just generally. I mean, in terms of this, where we're arresting mothers for leaving kids alone, particularly with 9-year-old kids in the park nearby a workplace, it's debatable whether that was really even necessary to arrest her. But in general, you know, we have very intense expectations around parenting, and that really hurts mothers who are trying to work. But legislatively, I actually think there are some bright spots in Washington, even if nothing is necessarily going to pass anytime soon. But there was a bill recently introduced around scheduling that would ban this just-in-time scheduling, this thing where you have someone come into work and then send them home immediately because of demand, or give them very short notice of their hours. It would just get rid of that practice, as well as require companies that if they have part-time workers, make sure those workers have a chance to go full-time before you go hire other people if you have more need for workers. And the other thing that's come out of Washington in regard to this situation is universal preschool. President Obama has really made this a sort of key idea for his second administration, that we should have universal preschool. And he talks about it in terms of education, which is very important, but it's also a form of childcare. His program would start at age 0 and go on up. And if it's high quality, if it's truly affordable, or even better, free and accessible, then we have solved so much of this situation for low-income moms. And we're giving those kids a bigger boost because they will be in a high-quality environment that has better outcomes later in life.
Yeah, I'm in favor of those. And, you know, from the work scheduling part, you know, I'm a big fan of workers joining unions and collective bargaining and bargaining for better wages, hours, conditions. So my answer to a lot of that stuff is, don't pass laws that are going to be broken. Give people the opportunity in their workplaces to sit down, negotiate, and then enforce locally. To me, that's one part of it. You're right with the universal preschool. I think from an educational standpoint, so important, but also as an opportunity to give parents a chance to have some reasonably priced daycare. I go back to when I was a kid. I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, and there were a number of programs at parks and at schools and activities that went on. You had after school programs that went on that, I remember when Ronald Reagan came into office, all of that stuff stopped. And to me, it's going back and maybe revitalizing some of those programs from the 70s that I benefited from.
Yeah, those programs are so important, and we still see some really great programs, and it's not really necessarily a blue state, red state thing. Oklahoma and Georgia have really high quality universal preschool programs, and they're doing very well. The results out of them are really promising for kids, for parents, and for the state in general, having a better workforce and a smart investment. It could be a bipartisan thing. I think that a lot of families really support this. People across political persuasions and demographics are in favor of these kinds of things because so many of them deal with the reality. Even if you're not a single parent, even if you're a two-parent family, it's still very challenging to find and afford childcare so you can both go to work.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying, and my wife and I are fortunate that she wanted to stay home and raise our kids, but it's difficult. It is on us, and it just we see our struggles of our friends who, one neighbor just had an infant, and you got to find infant care, which is almost impossible.
And it's hard to find, and then even if you find it, it's very expensive. I mean, childcare right now is more than median rent in every state. It's more than what families spend on food. It's more than public college tuition in 31 states and D.C.
Wow.
So the costs of care are extremely high. We do not give parents very much in the way of support. There's very few subsidies available, and the tax credits you can get cover a very small percentage of what you'll end up paying. And that's, of course, that's if you can find it, which a lot of families can't even find the quality care that they want.
Wow, you lay it out like that. So much for that whole family values nonsense. I keep hearing politicians talk about how much they love children and how much they believe in family values. You lay it out like that, and maybe I missed something.
I think one of the best things you could do for our country's kids right now is to give families access to free, high-quality early childhood education and childcare.
That's a good start. And make sure that they get a good quality education all the way through. As high as their skill and their interest can take them, and not have a school district like in Philadelphia where they don't have nurses and librarians or guidance counselors or any of that stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, and particularly if parents are leaving their kids at public schools, they should be able to trust that their kids are being well educated and well taken care of.
Good point. Bryce, I appreciate you giving us a little bit of time. The article, fantastic. Of course, we're arresting poor mothers for our own failures, written by Bryce Covert over at The Nation magazine. We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Bryce, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
All righty, let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's time for the world in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the UN. On yesterday's broadcast, I featured a quote from UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon that UN staff were among the dead when a UN-operated school in Gaza was shelled. Today, the UN walked that claim back. 15 civilians were indeed killed in the attack, but UN staff were not among them. After extensive negotiations between U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, Ban Ki-moon, Egypt's foreign minister, and the head of the Arab League, a ceasefire deal to end the 18-day Israeli-Palestinian crisis is reportedly close at hand. According to preliminary sketches of the deal, a week-long temporary ceasefire is on the table, and both parties to the conflict would receive a meaningful concession. For Israel, that could include the ability to continue ground operations near the Israeli-Gaza border in a search for illegal tunnels. To address a major Palestinian grievance, Egypt would reportedly end the blockade of Gaza that's been in place since 2007. Moving around the world before we let the week slip away, a change of parliamentary leadership in Ukraine as Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk resigns. According to Ukrainian officials and Yatsenyuk himself, the move was a sign of the strength of the current pro-EU government, since the interim prime minister had long promised to step aside when the time was right, so that Ukrainians could go to the polls and elect their members of parliament from scratch. And finally, there are no survivors of a jet crash in the African nation of Mali yesterday. The Spanish-operated Swift Air flight was carrying 116 people aboard. Foul play is not suspected, but the crash was the third for a commercial airliner in 7 days, after a Malaysian Airlines jet was shot down in Ukraine last week, and a Trans-Asia Airlines jet went down in Taiwan on Wednesday. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
Minimum wage!
You know what it means when they pay you minimum wage? You know what they're trying to tell you is like, hey, if I could pay you less, I would.
Yeah. Cy sent me an email during the break saying that, a whole bunch of expletives about childcare. I shouldn't have the kids if you can't afford them. The whole right-wing argument about, if you can't afford them, you shouldn't have them. If you don't have the people to take care of them, you shouldn't have them. You should, and you go, okay, well, that's an argument, not a good one, Cy. And I wish people with these kind of arguments would call 1-888-520-RICK, 1-888-520-7425. Line's always open for you, Cy. But this whole idea of blaming the parents, blaming the mother, what is. These are women who are, and I think back to my own mother, who struggled mightily to find jobs, and generally the last one hired, first one fired. And that whole unpredictable scheduling, we lived through that. Even in nursing care settings and whatever she did, it was always the worst job you could get. And it was short, usually short term. And you generally knew that going in, it's going to be for a couple of weeks, and then and it was always unpredictable. And I think back to myself, think back to those times where, you would wake up and, okay, mom's not home. I'll take care of myself. And we struggle with this with our kids. My wife and I struggle with this all the time. How much do we let go? My mother was I can't imagine, how she did it. Then again, I think, it was society as well. Because as I was telling my wife, I go, I would be gone from morning till night. The sun was up, bang, I was out the door, got home when the street lights came on. As my mother said, there was nothing ever any good outside when the street lights are on. And in my neighborhood, that was very true. But you had a whole bunch of other kids that you were out running around with. And, I don't think you see that as much. And I think it's a cultural thing as well. I think, kids should be out running around. And as we talked with John Mysick last week, if you don't have scraped knees and dirt under your nails and banged up elbows and bruises, you're not doing summer right. At least not in our view, you're not. But I look at this though. You're locking mothers up who are trying to work, who are trying to do what they're supposed to do. And the other story of the woman in Arizona who the kids were in the car with the air conditioning on while she went in for a job interview because the babysitter that she had lined up didn't come through, and you go, what was she supposed to do? And I know, Cy, it's easy to say, well, she shouldn't have had him. It's easy to say. It really is. It's easy to go down that route. But what do you do once you're in it? See, okay, then we can talk about prevention. And I know. I'll bet you Cy would be one of the guys who would say, well, we should teach abstinence only. Sure, he's one of those guys. Even though we know it doesn't work, we should continue down that path. so that we can punish people down the road in the event that they do have children. And I love those people. Oh, we love the children until they're born. And then, well, let them starve. Let them go without health care. It's nuts. Just nuts to me. I mean, the political rhetoric around this, just nuts to me. Anyway, let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
The production is going to increase. Our safety standards have to increase with it.
New rules for explosive oil trains. Big win in Maine over big tar sands oil. Plus,
and on the subject of climate change, U.S. citizens reveal themselves to be more divided than any other nation.
We're number one. America leads the world in global warming denial.
Thanks, Rush. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It's ironically humorous.
Yes, it is, Rush. In just the same way that the idea of thousands, if not millions of people dying from droughts, fires, storms, floods is ironically hysterical. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air today, breaking news out of Virginia. 2 people were killed and at least 26 others injured on Thursday after a powerful storm swept through a campground filled with vacationing families. The storm brought heavy rains, fierce winds, baseball-sized hail, snapped towering trees, sending some crashing onto tents, campers, and cars at the Cherrystone Family Camping Resort in Cape Charles, north of Norfolk. One of the campers, Jordan Burtock, tweeted, "Just lived through a tornado. Children are missing. People are dead. Trees are down. Campers are flipped."
Yes, it was a really stunning, powerful storm that came up so quickly. The National Weather Service had not yet even issued a tornado watch. They did issue a tornado warning, but they only had about 20 minutes of warning before it hit.
So what kind of cheery news do you have for us today, Des?
Well, let's see. How about new rules for oil trains?
Sounds like fun.
After a rash of oil train explosions amid the U.S. drilling boom, including one in Canada last year that incinerated the downtown of Lac Megantic and killed 47 people, well, now the Obama administration has proposed new rules to phase out within 2 years a type of rail car that is prone to rupture. Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox defended the proposed rules in an interview with PBS NewsHour.
Crude by rail shipments have increased from 2008 for 9,500 carloads to more than 415,000 carloads, a 4,000% increase. So the production is going to increase. Our safety standards have to increase with it.
The proposed rules include new speed limits and flammability testing for North Dakota's Bakken shale oil. Now, while the railroad industry is receptive to the new rules, the oil industry is not, because it will raise their shipping costs. Ron Ness of the North Dakota Petroleum Council seems to think the danger is overstated.
At 99.7% of the time, rail movements get to their destination safely.
Oh, well, that's good. 99.7% of the time. Why complain? Rachel Maddow spoke about the lobbying against new rules for these oil bomb trains just a few months ago.
Lobbyists for the rail car manufacturers said the same thing. These rail cars are getting a bad rap. They're totally fine. We swear we love explosions.
Score one for the little guy over big oil. The City Council of tiny South Portland, Maine has voted to block the use of its port to load and ship heavy tar sands oil from Canada over concerns about pollution, oil spills, and climate change. The ban passed despite a massive oil industry PR campaign that reportedly spent over $700,000 in advertising in the small town of just 25,000 people and even bussed in supporters to city council meetings. The American Petroleum Institute is threatening to sue to force the town to allow the shipments.
Of course they are. This is the case where they're trying to figure out how to get these tar sands out of the country. With Keystone XL potentially being blocked, they're looking at reversing a pipeline which currently goes from the East Coast up to Canada. They want to reverse it to send the tar sands out through Maine, and that's what the town is trying to block.
Yep. We're number one. Americans lead the world in global warming denial. In a broad survey of public opinion conducted by Ipsos Mori across 20 developed countries, the United States is the most climate change denying nation on the planet, with the highest percentage of people who reject the global scientific consensus that humans are causing dangerous global warming. Naturally, right-wing radio host Rush Limbaugh takes credit for dumbing down America.
Why would the U.S. be the leading nation with the highest amount of doubt about the conventional wisdom of climate? Why do you think that would be? I think that's exactly right. Me.
Yes, you, Rush. More specifically, the fact that America has more corporate radio than any other nation in the world, I suspect. So, of course, we hear more of the corporate lies from the fossil fuel industry through their mouthpiece known as Rush Limbaugh.
There are signs of change, however. A new Media Matters analysis finds that in the first 6 months of this year, the network news shows covered climate change as much as they did in the last 4 years combined.
That would be good news as long as you don't pay attention to how little they covered it in the last 4 years combined.
Trying to look for the good news.
Ever the optimist. For much more on those stories and the ones we couldn't get to in this busy news day, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help keep the Green News Report on your public airwaves. Someone's got to fight against Rush. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
What you say about his company is what you say about society.
Uncovering the con in conservatism. Rick Smith.
Gotta find a way to hold him to account. Before they find a way to snuff our voices out. Can you hear us? Are you listening? No power without accountability.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. So the other day, I'm reading this article in the Wall Street Journal, the paper of the investor class. I'm pretty sure they still do they still call themselves that? It used to be that was their tagline. They were the newspaper of the investor class. I know since Murdoch brought it, they're trying to dumb it down to con most of us that we can all be the investor class. But there was an article there talking about the benefits of apprenticeship programs, which I am all 110% in favor of, especially the apprenticeship programs run by my brothers and sisters in organized labor, because they do it right. You don't pay them. They actually pay you to learn, and it's an amazing setup and a great education. But in this article, no mention of unions, no mention of the amazing work that our brothers and sisters in organized labor do. So I thought, maybe we should talk about that a little bit. Maybe we should, since the investor class newspaper didn't seem to highlight it, maybe I would, which is why I've asked Tom Krieger. He's Director of Research at the Building and Construction Trades Department there at the AFL-CIO. Tom, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about apprenticeship.
So I look at this story in the Wall Street Journal, and no mention of labor unions, no mention of those apprenticeship programs, but touting the benefits of them. And I thought, where best to go than people who actually do it right, our friends like you.
Yeah, the building trades have a 100-year history with over 100 years. I think the first one was started in maybe 1911 in the state of Wisconsin. So we've had a lot of years to do apprenticeship programs. We think they're very important. We think it's probably some of the best privately funded training in the United States. Collectively, all of our unions spend $1 billion a year on curriculum and training.
$1 billion?
Yeah, it's one of the largest privately funded education systems in the country.
How come we never hear about this?
Yeah, I don't know. In part, I think our own fault to a degree. I think the building trades are doing a better job, let me put it that way, the last few years. I mean, it was something that the trades have always done. I think people in the trades kind of took it for granted. But just like the story that you mentioned, a lot of people talk about the wages and all those things that come out of apprenticeships, and we're grateful for that. We're grateful for the Obama administration has really started talking about apprenticeships, but they don't always acknowledge that those wages, the programs themselves, the quality of the programs has come because of labor management cooperation.
I mean, I go back to when I was getting out of high school myself back in the mid '80s, and those programs were in the Cleveland area anyway were highly competitive, and there was a whole process to getting into them, because I think the people who were applying for them knew this is my chance to be not just in the middle class, but solidly in the middle class with a good skill.
Yeah, I mean, you used the key phrase there. These are middle class training programs. We train people for middle-class jobs, good wages, benefits, retirement. I mean, in that Wall Street Journal article, they quoted one of the workers who was from a non-union program, and he said, "Yep, I'll within a short time, I'll be making $10 an hour."
Oh boy!
I mean, that's not much more than you can make at your local fast food restaurant, and that's not what the building trades are doing. We're not pumping out people. Our president, Sean McGarvey, likes to use the expression, "We're not making widgets." These are training programs that last years, 3 or 4 years, and 5 years in some cases, and these are pathways to middle-class jobs, good salaries with benefits, retirement security, all those things. So, the middle-class aspect of it is really crucial.
Yeah, let me ask you about this, because they brought up in these articles, and in a number of articles, both right and left-leaning, that I don't think give labor enough credit. When you look at these training programs, especially, you can compare them, the labor side with the associated building and contractors, the ABC people.
Yeah, the ABC.
When you look at those, at the end of the road, which skills how many people finish the ABC programs compared to how many people finish the union apprenticeship programs? And then what do you end up with at the end of the road?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at that a few years ago. I did a big research project for the building trades about the ABC. They have apprenticeship programs. They have some in states around the country. They'll have a few thousand completions. In construction, the building trades, we train in the unionized construction sector 71% of all construction apprentices. And we're still a majority of all apprentices in the United States, I believe, are in the construction sector. So we're the critical mass of all of apprenticeship training in the country. And I also interviewed people that went through ABC training programs for this research project, as opposed to people who went through the building trades. And you were absolutely correct in the way you opened this segment when you said that the building trades apprenticeship programs, the electrical workers, the UA, the United Association of Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, all of our trades, you don't pay to attend. Those programs are paid for you by the previous generations of workers. It's those workers working in the field today who have been there, 15, 20 years. It's their contribution and their responsibility to train the next generation of workers.
Oh, that sounds like socialism.
It's a good system, is what it is. It's one that's been in place for many years. So there's a couple other things. Let me just say 2 other things about it. What I heard from people that went to the ABC programs is you had to pay to join. Some of the contractors paid. But also, since the people were paying themselves, if you missed a class or 2, it didn't really matter. If you miss a class or 2 and you're in a building trades program, you're out.
Right.
I mean, these are very rigorous programs with very, very high standards, because it's our goal to train the best qualified construction workers, skilled craft workers in the world.
And since you bring that up, how do we compare worldwide? I mean, I keep hearing there's a shortage. I keep hearing all this stuff. How do we compare with the rest of the world in training our building construction workers?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm glad you brought that up. There are a lot more apprentices in other countries around the world, Canada, Australia, Great Britain. And in large part because there used to be in the United States, there was in the 40s and 50s, a lot of apprentices in manufacturing and in industry. But those industries, for whatever reasons, and I don't really understand it, and outside of the construction industry, they decided to forego training, and they didn't put the money into it. The employers.
Right.
What you have among the building trades, particularly among our signatory contractors, our affiliated contractors that are affiliated with unions all around the country, is a real strong commitment, and that's what that's what funds this system as well. This comes out of collective bargaining. This is all privately funded. It's not funded. There's no taxpayer money that goes into this, and it's done on the basis of labor management communication. Now, when you hear about unions these days, your show is great. You're pretty well read, and you get around. Is that a story that you hear about? Here's a huge billion-dollar privately funded training operation that's based on labor management cooperation?
Nope.
Of course not. That's a story you don't hear, right? And we're doing a better job of getting that story out.
So I look at this, and you brought up that manufacturing, they used to have these apprenticeship programs, and I guess I would argue, being sitting in this chair, that a lot of that has to do with the destruction of organized labor in those industries, because I seem to remember that those were things that were negotiated and brought along by the different crafts, that we wanted to make sure, like the building trades is doing, to make sure that we have the best workforce so that our members get the work.
And you're exactly right, and that's what's interesting. I mean, there's been a lot of focus. As I said, the Obama administration, Vice President Biden has focused on this. There's been a lot of think tanks in Washington and people that have been, and raising the stature, if you will. Our President Sean McGarvey likes to say that apprenticeship's got its sexy back, which is true, and we're glad for that. But we don't, and where this usually comes down is, well, we need to do tax breaks and other forms of government subsidies to create these programs.
No.
The most stable apprenticeship programs we've been talking about here on your show are the programs in the building trades, and those are privately funded. So we're a little concerned that, there are other industries that see that you have to have government money to do it. We think the best way to do it is to get employers to do it and to have labor management cooperation. And that's where unions comes in.
Yeah,
where we were taken back like you were on that Wall Street Journal article that didn't mention it.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this, and my grandparents' generation, apprenticeships were commonplace. You went in, you started at the ground floor, you worked your way up, and it was the employer doing it, as you've said, with labor management relations and cooperation. But as we've moved away and destroyed workers' voice on the job, and we've moved to this heavily greed function, that kind of stuff's fallen to the wayside, especially when they realized that workers would pay for those skills. Once you figured out that if I'm going to be a plumber or something, I'll pay someone to teach me. I think that's where a lot went awry as well.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, I think people are sort of grasping, some of the advocates of expanding apprenticeship, and again, we support it. We think the building trades apprenticeships should be expanded. We'd like to look at state, local governments, federal governments putting in more requirements for use of apprenticeships on publicly funded projects.
Yes.
That's one way. That's one way we see that you could have more apprentices. But I think they're trying to do it, with maybe other mediating institutions, let's call it, without organized labor, and we don't see we don't see how that comes off.
Yeah, I see it as having mixed priorities. I mean, if you're going to put it into the hands solely of the employer, their interest is making money. Their interest isn't making quality, electricians or quality machinists or any of that. They want their stuff done. They want it done now. They're not thinking 10, 20 years down the road. So I can see how the priorities could be skewed if you put it in a different area, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing that distinguishes our programs, the union programs, they tend to be multi-employer.
Right.
They tend to be funded across, a number of different employers because, and this is where the non-union side they're playing catch-up. They don't have apprenticeships in construction. That to the numbers that you see on the unionized side is, I think individual employers are afraid if they set up their own particular, individual training program and they train workers, and they'll go someplace else for higher wages. So, it really has to be a market-wide in many cases. It works much better where you have multiple employers participating.
Right.
And I'll go back to that, that part about, you said it, labor management cooperation is the foundation upon which this whole system rests.
And it seems like now the Chamber of Commerce and that ilk are trying to say that that stuff doesn't exist, that they want control, and maybe I'm stating that wrong, but it seems like we're in an era where they want us to believe that you can't have that kind of cooperation.
Yeah, I mean,
does that make sense to you?
It does, but that's not the way that labor relations really go in the building trades. We have very close relationships with our contractors. And, you talked about the investor class. We're now making a big push, our officers and the building trades all across the country, to go back to investors and say, hey, wait a minute, we've got a service that you need. We've got the best trained, the safest working, the most highly skilled craft workers in the country. And it's turning around. There are a lot of employers that are now employing unionized construction workers that perhaps haven't in the past and are giving us a second look. There's also one other interesting point about it, and it's important today about apprenticeships, and this is it's to focus on young people, because I think this is something that they're not hearing in school, is that you don't have student debt. When our graduates from electrical workers, it's a 5-year program, very rigorous program, any of the building trades, when you graduate, you don't have any student debt. Your wages have been going up. It's an earn while you learn system. So if there's any young people out there listening to this show, maybe they think about, looking at the building trades, looking on our website, bctd.org. You can look at all of our 1,900 training centers across North America on an interactive map, because it's a pretty good living these days. And, as I said, you don't have any student debt when you come out.
Yeah, and they're not going to ship those jobs overseas anytime soon.
That's right.
And because my wife and I talk about this all the time, I wouldn't mind if my son or my daughters got into being an electrician, because they do some amazing high-tech stuff, or any of the other trades, because they're jobs that they're going to have and skills that they're going to have regardless if they have a job. You can still always make a living with one of those skills.
Absolutely. There's something that always sticks in my mind. Nick Wallenda, the son of the great Wallendas that walked across the gorge at Niagara Falls last year, I think a little while ago. Who do you think strung the wire? It was a unionized IBEW crew, I believe, out of Rochester, because they were the people that were used to stringing wires across canyons. And when it came time to put that wire across, they called in the highly skilled IBEW crew and that contractor to do it, because they were the best skilled people that was out there.
Yeah, I would guess if you're in that situation, you don't want a guy who just learned it yesterday, huh?
Yes, that's right.
Oh, well, I don't know. You wouldn't catch me walking across it, even with highly skilled people stringing it up. So last question I've got for you, and looking at this, because how do you get this message out to people? How do you get that? When I was a kid, I understood this. It was part of our culture. It was part of my neighborhood. You knew if you got this shot, you were moving on up. How do you bring that back?
That's a really good question. We have some answers. I don't think we have all of them. If anybody out there listening has, could suggest them to you, I'd love to hear them. I think it's people like you. We're very grateful to the Obama administration about raising the profile of apprentices. The president said he wants to double the number of apprentices. We're a little concerned that, it's going to be that there's the chance that you'll just have businesses reclassify existing employees as apprentices for a tax break. But we think if you follow the model that we've established, and we got a 100-year track record of success to show that model, and you have labor management communications, cooperation, you get businesses to buy in, you have employer engagement and investment in the program. Whenever we hold, whenever we really have openings, any building trades local that I know of, and I get these stories, people send them to me from all over the country. Whenever they have slots in an apprenticeship program, we'll have people camping out on the sidewalk. So I think in our case, it's partly to get the message out to young people. We're still working on the best way to do that.
Right.
But I also think it's a question of just simply construction jobs. And I think it's a question of that investor class taking another look at the unionized building trades and saying, hey, wow, these men and women are the best trained in the country. We've got to look at employing them, because they're going to be the most productive workers. They're going to be the safest workers. They're going to bring my project on time, on time and under budget. So I think that's the communications piece that's essential too.
There you go. Tom, I appreciate you taking time for us and filling me in a little bit on this and filling in the gaps that the Wall Street Journal left.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure.
Thanks so much. Tom Krieger, Director of Research at Building and Construction Trades Department, AFL-CIO. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Now who'd have thought that after all, something as simple as rock and roll would save us all? Now who'd have thought that after all, it was rock and roll?
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
Have you noticed that the powers that be employ an entirely different standard for measuring the health of America's job market than they use for the stock market? They're currently telling us that the job market is improving. What do they mean? Simply that the economy is generating an increase in the number of jobs available for workers. But when they say the stock market is improving, they don't mean that the number of stocks available to investors is on the rise. Instead, they're measuring the price, the value of the stocks. And isn't value what really counts in both cases? As a worker, you don't merely want to know that 200,000 new jobs are on the market, but what they're worth. Do they pay living wages? Do they come with benefits? Are they just part-time and temporary? Do they include union rights? What are the working conditions, etc.? In other words, are these jobs or scams? So it's interesting that the recent news of job market improvement doesn't mention that of the 10 occupation categories projecting the greatest growth in the next 8 years, only 1 pays a middle-class wage. 4 pay barely above the poverty level, and 5 pay beneath it, including fast food workers, retail sales staff, health aides, and janitors. The job expected to have the highest number of openings is personal care aide, taking care of aging baby boomers in their houses or in nursing homes. The median salary of an aide is under $20,000. They enjoy no benefits, and about 40% of them must rely on food stamps and Medicaid to make ends meet. Plus, many are in the, quote, shadow economy, vulnerable to being cheated on their already miserly wages. This is Jim Hightower saying, to measure the job market by quantity with no regard for quality is to devalue workers themselves. Creating 200,000 new jobs is not a sign of economic health if each worker needs 2 or 3 of those jobs to patch together a bare-bones living.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email rick@thericksmithshow.com. Don't forget, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com for the podcast. Also, if you've got a smartphone, the Rick Smith Show app, easily accessible from your smartphone anywhere. Take the program wherever you are. And best of all, it's absolutely, positively, it's free. And I know in these tough economic times, that's very important. Interesting story from the Los Angeles Times. The big headline, big, bold, 30 font type. Housing labor shortage turning more severe, boosting home prices. They go into argument. They go into the article saying, are you having a new home built? Is it taking longer than you expected? Well, blame those workers. And they said that due to the recession and not getting people work, that those craftsmen went on to other industries. This is their claim. Now, understand, and this is the part that gets me. Because the home, and you may think, well, building trades, construction, the unions have lost the home construction trades years ago. Every guy with a hammer can start his own building company. And you end up with some good, some bad, and some really horrible. And I've got friends who have built homes who've had them built and have nightmare stories to tell. Because any Tom, Dick, or Harry with a stencil for the side of the truck and a hammer and a saw, they're now Bob's contractor. And if you're dumb enough to give them your business, well, the article is saying that because of the recession and all these people who took their hammer and went elsewhere, it's taken longer to build new homes. And they're saying that as the housing market turns around, people want new homes. They're struggling to get more. In fact, according to a survey by the National Association of Home Builders, the labor shortage has become substantially more widespread since last year, and that they're actually, according to the survey, 2 out of every 3 builders have reported paying higher wages to get people back, and 3 out of 5 reported difficulty completing their houses on time. A third said rising labor costs had made some projects unprofitable, and 9% said they lost or canceled sales because of higher labor costs. Yeah, when you're talking about, and I met a number of guys last summer who they were working building houses for $11 an hour. And I'm going, are you kidding me? Yeah. So a raise up to 12 or 13, evidently, according to the industry, horrible for them. According to the Los Angeles Times, on average, builders said their direct labor costs, employees, have increased by 2.9% over the last 6 months, while subcontractor costs have increased 3.8% over the same time. They say extrapolate that over a full year, these increases would be 5.7% and 7.7% respectively, much higher than the roughly 2% year-over-year increase for the overall consumer index. So that means higher wages in the home building industry. And I'm going, over $10, $11 an hour? I'm sorry, 2% of that, 5% of that is not all that huge. It says more than half of all builders subcontract at least 75% of the construction work. And more than 95% always contract out some jobs. So what you've got is, and this is part of that, everyone can be their own boss thing. You get the building contractor who never swings a hammer. He's not the guy, and I know a couple of guys who do this stuff for a living. They're not the ones who ever actually do the work. They pay somebody lower down the chain. They go get the jobs, they pay someone, and they just oversee it. Which is, again, you've put a middleman between that you've got to feed a much higher wage than the guys who are actually doing the work. And it's one of those things that have always struck me as odd. But according to this report, this labor shortage, horrible shortage of low-wage workers, because that's what they're really saying. Because if you were to raise the wages up to a living wage, those folks would come back. Problem is, for so long, these contractors, and I've yet to meet a poor contractor. I know some contractors who have really nice, big, elaborate homes, while the people who actually did the work for them, well, they don't. And I guess it's just an interesting way of looking at it, or a different way, if you will. So interesting that while the jobs are increasing in other places, wages haven't gone up, but a little bit here in the building and construction trades, or a little bit in the home building, not so much in the high rise and these, because the difference is, the building trades, they build big buildings. They don't necessarily have these $11 an hour jobs, because I don't know that it would be worth training someone for that. But there you go. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone, always there, always on. Whenever you want to hear it, just flip it right on. It's there. Easy as can be. If you want to email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally and actually enjoy the really negative, angry ones. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Time to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, changing America for the better.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to the If you've missed any portion of the program, download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
This is what a union looks like. Show some love. This is your union home. Yeah. Look around at your brothers and sisters. This is your union, all right?
About 1,000 fast food workers from cities nationwide gathered in Chicago for a Fight for 15 convention over the weekend. They decided to escalate their campaign for a $15 an hour minimum wage and a union. Ashana Osborne is from Pittsburgh.
I'm so pumped up. I know that we're going to win, and we're not going to stop fighting until we win. And just seeing everyone here supporting and ready to go fight and pumped up, I'm just so excited. This movement is about standing up and taking what's ours. We need respect, stop living in poverty, and earn what we deserve. First time that we were here in May, I took an arrest to make sure that they know that we are taken serious. And I will get arrested again. I'll keep getting arrested until they hear us and take it serious and go with what we need.
Lena Germany is from Pennsylvania. She had a message for fast food corporate management.
Wendy's, Popeyes, KFC, anywhere. We all want to be treated fair. We don't want to feel like we're beneath nothing. In our training, you tell us our main thing is to make sure our customers feel special. We do that, but you as our bosses don't make us feel special. Make us feel like we are needed here. But we work our butts off for you. As long as we got our hope and our strength and our numbers, we're going to make it happen to where we get the respect we deserve.
My name is Melinda Topol. I'm a fast food worker from Kansas City, Missouri. When people stand up and fight for what they believe in, it gives other people the encourage to stand up and fight for what they believed in. They've just been scared to do it. There's power in numbers. So if we all stand together, we're going to continue to fight and we're going to grow bigger.
My name is Daisha Mims, and I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I'm a single mother of 3. I receive government assistance, but I still don't make enough to cover my bills. I was actually the first person from my store that went the first 2 times, and the 3rd time I actually got 9 other people as well as a couple others to walk out to join the strike team.
Armando Dukes is from Atlanta.
I got a part of this because I work for the Burger King franchise. I've been there 6 years, and I'm making $7.35. I only got a 10-cent raise out of 6 years being there. So I'm trying to make it better not only for myself, but for other folk that deserve this, that have been working hard for these companies and not getting the pay that they should. This is very important for society and people, lower class people that work. It's very important that we get this done no matter what. We got to keep going and trying to get it done.
We're ready to escalate the campaign because I don't think they heard us the first 15 times we decided to walk out.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Just when you thought it was safe, those crazy Republicans are at it again. It's time for the Rick Smith Show's Conservative Alerts.
Well, crazy back out in the streets of Austin. Crazy back out in the streets of Austin, Texas. Yes, the open carry people. They have a new name, or a faction group. They've all got their own little names, their own little games. But this one kind of made me laugh. This was one of those stories that kind of makes you chuckle and go, well, the open carry people, or as they're calling themselves, CATI, C-A-T-I. Come and take it is their I don't get CATI, but come and take it, I don't get either. Evidently, they were walking through the streets of downtown Austin with their guns, to highlight the fact that they've got guns. Makes them very happy, makes them very, whatever. they met some protesters, or some counter-protesters, however you want to look at it. A couple of women who decided that they were going to walk down the street topless. And these were some large women, and give them credit, what they deserve. They were proud. They were walking down the street, everything hanging out, literally. And the gun people not happy. And in fact, the guy who's the head of this group, president and founder of Gun Rights Across America, a guy named Eric Reed, he wrote an interesting piece. Basically, going after these women who they had to be paid for by mothers demanding action, that fringe group that wants to steal your guns. But these two women are out there topless. Did I mention they were topless? Yeah, everything hanging out and hanging, like I said, because evidently in Texas, it is their right to do. So if and I get the point that you've got, these topless people, these topless women, and good for them, because if you could come with yours hanging out, they should as well. That, I guess, is the thought. Well, this guy is upset, just outraged that these women would walk around with their breasts hanging out, and holding signs with vulgar sexual messages like boobs feed babies, vulgar stuff, real nasty, kind of down and dirty. That they bring joy and comfort to the world, just ugly, nasty stuff. Not like our wonderful guns, not like our wonderful guns, our phallic guns, not like that at all. And I just thought it was hysterical that this crazy bunch of people walking around with their guns would be outraged at a couple of women bearing their chest. Personally, I think it's great, but I guess it kind of shows the mental workings of some of these people. And as they're harassing these women, and then evidently the women who weren't going to be, and I watched the video, they weren't going to be shamed. I mean, these are women in their 40s. These are women who don't care anymore. You're not going to shame these women. These are women who have raised children. At that point, like as my wife says, at some point modesty goes aside, and you just are. And evidently they were, basically, shaming these guys with these guns. And then, the gun guys are saying they're harassing us. And I thought it was hysterical that you've got these big macho guys carrying their guns, letting their guns hang out, complaining that these women with their tops off are harassing them. And I guess it's funny on one hand, but it's scary on another. That you've got these people who are so tuned in to there's someone going to steal from us. And I think it's the conservative mind. I really do. I think it's the mindset, and it's got to be physiological, because I don't know that it's learned behavior. I'm not certain, because if you remember last week we talked about there was a study done that appeared to prove that ideology was much more important than fact-based thinking. That if you want to believe something and the facts are overwhelmingly in opposition to what you believe, that you dig in a little bit deeper, that the ideology takes over. And it was a study about vaccines. They were saying that, you read this article and when they showed overwhelming evidence that vaccinations are safe and that they're actually good for society, that the people who were at the beginning against the idea of vaccines actually dug in deeper and were even less likely to go and have them for their children. And it's one of those things that just kind of is shocking. Just one of those things. So it got me to thinking, what other things are out there? And I got an email over the weekend that had an article in it about some of the things that fall into line like this. Because you have those people who believe vaccines are bad no matter what you show them. They just dig in deeper, and they shut down even more. And this article had 5 of these things of facts that are making people even dumber. And the first one is one that I've railed on for years. This idea, this very conservative idea that tax cuts increase revenue. That if we cut taxes, money will flow like rivers of honey. You know, we've been hearing that since the Reagan years. And there is a year that it happened. Honestly, there is a factual year that it happened. There was a moment in time, but that's gone. Those days are gone. You know, you go back to the tax reform bill of '86 where they did that. They lowered the rate. They closed some loopholes, and that next year, because of the closing of the loopholes, yes, you got a little bit more. A little bit. But then we immediately went and gave back all the loopholes, and then you lost. And that's been the case ever since. So in 2010, there was a study done by a couple of guys who, you know, had a fake newspaper article and had people, you know, with real quotations of George W. Bush, you know, talking about how the tax cuts helped increase revenue in the Treasury and, you know, some other parts of this. And then there was a correction put at the end of the article that stated that, in fact, the Bush cuts were followed by an unprecedented 3-year decline in nominal tax revenues. That you had a unprecedented, historically unprecedented drop in revenue. And yet the people who were conservative, labeled themselves as conservatives, read the corrections 2-3 times. They were twice as likely to believe that it actually increased. So as you're looking at these numbers going, wait a second, it's the belief system. And you go down the list. I mean, death panels was another one. They did the exact same thing with death panels. The people who like Sarah Palin dug in even deeper because, you know, those other people have to be wrong because Sarah would never lie to us. Even if she was drunk at the speech over the weekend, which it appears. If you watch the video of she gave a speech over the weekend, she looks bombed out of her mind, which was hysterical because she was horrible. So you got to be pretty ticked if you're one of those people paying to sit and listen to that nonsense. And they went down the other one. You know, you look at Obama's a Muslim. And even though, you know, time and time again there have been, you know, statements and all of this stuff, you know, I believe. Global warming, the same thing. It's I believe. And, you know, we've talked about this before. It's that I believe mentality over reality. And, you know, as we've talked about, that I believe mentality is kind of dangerous in my view, because I try to look at all the facts. I try to go, you know, give me the information and then I'll decide what I can find. The other one that they gave out, which is a huge one, and I was just looking for the clips. They actually, and I've actually played these clips for people. There was a study by a guy at Northwestern University who, you know, this whole thing with Iraq. You've got people who believe that Iraq and Al-Qaeda were like peas and carrots. They were hand in hand. They were, in fact, Al-Qaeda, bin Laden and Hussein were sitting down to coffee, figuring out how to bomb the trade centers. Even though you had George W. Bush himself.
What did Iraq have to do with what? The attack on the World Trade Center. Nothing.
Nothing. Even though you played that
What
clip.
did Iraq have to do with what? The attack on the World Trade Center. Nothing.
Nothing.
The main reason we went into Iraq at the time was we thought he had weapons of mass destruction. It turns out he didn't.
No, he didn't. And I don't even know if you believed it when you went in. But I go back and I think about this. Because in this study from the folks at Northwestern, they went and they cited this stuff along with the findings from the 9/11 Commission and all kinds of stuff. And think what you want about the 9/11 Commission. Even though you had all of this stuff in place, and you had Bush himself, that, you know, there was nothing between Hussein and Al-Qaeda. Despite all of that, only one of the 49 of the partisans actually changed their mind or acknowledged that it was possible. 41 of the partisans deflected the information, they said, in a variety of ways, and 7 actually denied holding the belief in the first place. So you look at this stuff and you go, given all of this information, how do we change the direction of our country? Because I got to tell you, when I look at what's going on in Washington, when I look at what's going on in Harrisburg, when I look at what's going on around this country, nothing is going on. And that's a huge problem because we've got all of this partisan gridlock. How do you come to that place where things actually start to get done again? And I'm of the mindset it only happens when we, the people, all of us, collectively through our elected officials, start having some common sense. You know, my grandparents' generation, they had their political differences, but there were some things that were decided. Labor laws, decided. Farm bills, decided. Social Security, decided. Yeah, you go back and you read the Eisenhower quote. Anybody who would come out against the Farm Bill, labor laws, unemployment insurance, Social Security, any of that stuff, they wouldn't be heard from. They'd be done. Now, he admitted they're a couple, but they're stupid. We need to be going back to those days. Maybe just waking up a little bit. And I think that's kind of where it starts. Kind of in the wake up stupid mode. Just a thought. 1-888-520-RICK. 1-888-520-7425. If you want to join in. Thought. Right back.
We gotta get over tonight. We gotta do it today. No more madness than fury. No more misery. We gotta get over tonight.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
It's time for the world in 2. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, reporting for Talk Radio News Service at the UN. On yesterday's broadcast, I featured a quote from UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon that UN staff were among the dead when a UN-operated school in Gaza was shelled. Today, the UN walked that claim back. 15 civilians were indeed killed in the attack, but UN staff were not among them. After extensive negotiations between U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, Ban Ki-moon, Egypt's foreign minister, and the head of the Arab League, a ceasefire deal to end the 18-day Israeli-Palestinian crisis is reportedly close at hand. According to preliminary sketches of the deal, a week-long temporary ceasefire is on the table, and both parties to the conflict would receive a meaningful concession. For Israel, that could include the ability to continue ground operations near the Israeli-Gaza border in a search for illegal tunnels. To address a major Palestinian grievance, Egypt would reportedly end the blockade of Gaza that's been in place since 2007. Moving around the world before we let the week slip away, a change of parliamentary leadership in Ukraine as Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk resigns. According to Ukrainian officials and Yatsenyuk himself, the move was a sign of the strength of the current pro-EU government, since the interim prime minister had long promised to step aside when the time was right, so that Ukrainians could go to the polls and elect their members of parliament from scratch. And finally, there are no survivors of a jet crash in the African nation of Mali yesterday. The Spanish-operated Swift Air flight was carrying 116 people aboard. Foul play is not suspected, but the crash was the third for a commercial airliner in 7 days, after a Malaysian Airlines jet was shot down in Ukraine last week, and a Trans-Asia Airlines jet went down in Taiwan on Wednesday. For more global news headlines, visit talkradionews.com.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME.
There is no America. There is no democracy. There is only IBM and ITT and AT&T and DuPont, Dow, Union Carbide, and Exxon. Those are the nations of the world today.
Let's add Walgreen to that. They are the corporations of the world. They don't have any allegiance to any country, especially this one. They should be able to go, right? They should be able to go wherever they want, wherever they can get the best deal. Isn't that the free market? Shouldn't they be allowed to go wherever they want, wherever they can get the best deal? Where they can stuff the most money in their own pockets? Shouldn't they be allowed to do that? Well, as I've been saying, if it were up to me, the only thing you'd hear in a Walgreen, crickets. If it were me, in which I'm not going back into one, crickets. That's all you should hear. But here's the thing that gets me. You've got a couple of billionaires, two of them, in fact. A guy named Barry Rosenstein, who evidently, according to the New York Post, is going to buy or just closing on a $147 million beach house. They're claiming this is the highest price paid for a residential house in this country. $147 million for a beach house. I'll bet you it has a swimming pool. Maybe one that even works. This billionaire, along with the Italian billionaire Stefano Persana, they're going to push for Walgreen to, when they merge with the British drugstore chain, which I'm going, really? Allison Boots? Isn't that what it's called? Something Boots. I'll have to add, next time I see Alliance Boots, I think it is. Now they've moved. They want to merge, and they want to move to Switzerland. And you've got these two billionaires who are pushing for it. And why are they pushing for it? Well, they're pushing for it for $4 billion over the next couple of years. $4 billion. That's what they think they can divvy up amongst themselves instead of, paying U.S. taxes of $4 billion. Where do you think that $4 billion would go into? Oh, I don't know. It's things like roads and bridges and schools and healthcare and stuff that workers and taxpayers and citizens need, right? Are you okay with that? Do you think, like as I do, crickets? According to the New York Post, though, they think, the Post is saying that there could be a huge backlash. There could be crickets because finally someone has made some awareness of tax inversion, which is a fairly common practice, where these big companies, they merge together, they move their headquarters somewhere else, and voila, they're able to have the American loophole, where they go somewhere else. So they take all the profit that they make here in this country and they funnel it through, their foreign headquarters, and they scrub it clean, and we here in this country get nothing. Now the right wing would argue, but Rick, if we just lowered taxes, if we lowered it down to zero, they wouldn't leave. A lot of these companies are already paying close to zero. In fact, a lot of them are actually getting stuff. I mean, I look at Walgreen, who, they've got like $46 million worth of state tax breaks over the last decade. They've already held the state of Illinois hostage. When do we wake up and say, we've got to start holding somebody accountable? Just kind of a thought. Rich sent me an email. He said, how would you like to be an American combat pilot and know that the plane you're about to fly over a war zone was put together by a stressed out worker? He's talking about the Boeing interview I had last week. I asked the question, will I be able to make the mortgage if I get cut? Did I tighten that screw? How will I pay for my kids' braces? Did I set those electronics correctly? He said, Boeing is a freaking disgrace. If not for the taxpayers, Boeing would not even exist. And that's true. And you look at a lot of these companies. Like Walgreens, we give them huge amounts of tax breaks. And in every community, they get something. So, I mean, how much becomes enough? These corporations, they get away with just about everything from wage theft to murder, if you will, and never a consequence. And you look at a statement by Ted Kaufman, a former U.S. Senator from Delaware, who wrote in Forbes, yet another year has passed with no one from Wall Street going to jail for the criminal behavior everyone knows helped cause the financial crisis. Fines across Wall Street banks are reaching $100 billion, but all will be paid by stockholders. Bank CEOs and managers pay no fines, face no prison. At some point, just a thought, we need to be holding these people accountable. And I think the Gray Bar Hotel, not a bad place. Might actually be good for them. Might actually give them a little reason not to do the things that they've done. But still, I mean, like the former senator said, nobody's gone to jail. Nobody. And we're talking trillions in wealth from one way or another lost. Look at all the pension fund problems we've got, all of the retirement security stuff that's gone, all of that wealth that just evaporated. Something seriously, seriously wrong. Quick break, right back.
We want the world and we want it now. We're going to take it anyhow. We want the airwaves.
Not right wing, just right. The Rick Smith Show.
The production is going to increase. Our safety standards have to increase with it.
New rules for explosive oil trains. Big win in Maine over big tar sands oil. Plus,
and on the subject of climate change, U.S. citizens reveal themselves to be more divided than any other nation.
We're number one. America leads the world in global warming denial.
Thanks, Rush. All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
It's ironically humorous.
Yes, it is, Rush. In just the same way that the idea of thousands, if not millions of people dying from droughts, fires, storms, floods is ironically hysterical. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, as we go to air today, breaking news out of Virginia. 2 people were killed and at least 26 others injured on Thursday after a powerful storm swept through a campground filled with vacationing families. The storm brought heavy rains, fierce winds, baseball-sized hail, snapped towering trees, sending some crashing onto tents, campers, and cars at the Cherrystone Family Camping Resort in Cape Charles, north of Norfolk. One of the campers, Jordan Bertok, tweeted, "Just lived through a tornado. Children are missing. People are dead. Trees are down. Campers are flipped."
Yes, it was a really stunning, powerful storm that came up so quickly. The National Weather Service had not yet even issued a tornado watch. They did issue a tornado warning, but they only had about 20 minutes of warning before it hit.
So what kind of cheery news do you have for us today, Des?
Well, let's see. How about new rules for oil trains?
Sounds like fun.
After a rash of oil train explosions amid the U.S. drilling boom, including one in Canada last year that incinerated the downtown of Lac Megantic and killed 47 people, well, now the Obama administration has proposed new rules to phase out within 2 years a type of rail car that is prone to rupture. Transportation Secretary Anthony Fox defended the proposed rules in an interview with PBS NewsHour.
Crude by rail shipments have increased from 2008 for 9,500 carloads to more than 415,000 carloads, a 4,000% increase. So the production is going to increase. Our safety standards have to increase with it.
The proposed rules include new speed limits and flammability testing for North Dakota's Bakken shale oil. Now, while the railroad industry is receptive to the new rules, the oil industry is not, because it will raise their shipping costs. Ron Ness of the North Dakota Petroleum Council seems to think the danger is overstated.
At 99.7% of the time, rail movements get to their destination safely.
Oh, well, that's good. 99.7% of the time. Why complain? Rachel Maddow spoke about the lobbying against new rules for these oil bomb trains just a few months ago.
Lobbyists for the rail car manufacturers said the same thing. These rail cars are getting a bad rap. They're totally fine. We swear we love explosions.
Score one for the little guy over big oil. The city council of tiny South Portland, Maine has voted to block the use of its port to load and ship heavy tar sands oil from Canada over concerns about pollution, oil spills, and climate change. The ban passed despite a massive oil industry PR campaign that reportedly spent over $700,000 in advertising in the small town of just 25,000 people and even bussed in supporters to city council meetings. The American Petroleum Institute is threatening to sue to force the town to allow the shipments.
Of course they are. This is the case where they're trying to figure out how to get these tar sands out of the country. With Keystone XL potentially being blocked, they're looking at reversing a pipeline which currently goes from the East Coast up to Canada. They want to reverse it to send the tar sands out through Maine, and that's what the town is trying to block.
Yep. We're number one. Americans lead the world in global warming denial. In a broad survey of public opinion conducted by Ipsos Mori across 20 developed countries, the United States is the most climate change denying nation on the planet, with the highest percentage of people who reject the global scientific consensus that humans are causing dangerous global warming. Naturally, right-wing radio host Rush Limbaugh takes credit for dumbing down America.
Why would the U.S. be the leading nation with the highest amount of doubt about the conventional wisdom of climate? Why do you think that would be? I think that's exactly right. Me.
Yes, you, Rush. More specifically, the fact that America has more corporate radio than any other nation in the world, I suspect. So, of course, we hear more of the corporate lies from the fossil fuel industry through their mouthpiece known as Rush Limbaugh.
There are signs of change, however. A new Media Matters analysis finds that in the first 6 months of this year, the network news shows covered climate change as much as they did in the last 4 years combined.
That would be good news as long as you don't pay attention to how little they covered it in the last 4 years combined.
Trying to look for the good news.
Ever the optimist. For much more on those stories and the ones we couldn't get to in this busy news day, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help keep the Green News Report on your public airwaves. Someone's got to fight against Rush. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
What you say about his company is what you say about society.
The production is going to increase. Our safety standards have to increase with it.
New rules for explosives.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Let's find out what's going on in Washington, D.C. and around the world. I've got Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service, on the line. Justin, what's going on, man?
Hey, Rick, great to be here. It's a pretty busy week. Congress, of course, is planning on leaving on Wednesday for a 5-week recess. That's something that they do every August. And as a result, they're trying to get quite a few things in under the wire as we deal with some, huge domestic issues and some brewing foreign policy issues.
Yeah, I know my congressman in our area, one of the most pressing issues of the day, he introduced a bill to make medical marijuana oil legal, kind of trying to preempt what they're trying to do here on the state level. Scott Perry, and I generally don't like him, but I'm okay with this.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of a changing sign of the times. Even the New York Times now, I guess, in an editorial that they released yesterday, is now endorsing the notion of marijuana legalization. So if even the gray lady is getting behind it, it's kind of safe to say that this is not the political football that it once was.
Yeah, but it's not medical marijuana. He's just okay with the oil.
No, I mean I guess would that be hashish oil? I haven't really been following them.
The hemp oil, I believe, is what they said was okay.
Okay. Well, I probably just revealed way too much about my knowledge.
Look, to be honest, I never did it. I have a clue kind of what it looks like if you tell me that that's what it is. But if I had to pick it out of with a bunch of other weeds, I probably couldn't do it.
Oh, well, that's good to know.
Yeah. So to me, one way or another, I don't care. But if you're one of these kids suffering from epilepsy, if you're one of these people suffering from cancer side effects, if you've got glaucoma, a lot of this stuff that they say it could help cure, I'm all in favor of it.
Yeah, that's actually a very responsible kind of take to have on that, and one that a lot of people kind of adopt tongue in cheek, but it sounds actually kind of authentic with you since you're coming from that angle. So kudos to you.
Yeah, there you go. So what's going on? More chaos, more stuff in Gaza.
Yeah, the big news was the UN calling for an immediate ceasefire between the two parties, and this is something that happened over the weekend but was violated. And now it looks like neither party are really going to be backing this one. We've seen that the Israelis have taken issue with the language of the ceasefire, essentially saying that it doesn't really do enough to curb Hamas's rocket fire. And we also have the Palestinian representation of the UN saying that this isn't going as far as they would like either. With them saying that what they are basically looking for is a withdrawal of Israeli forces from the region, as well as the lifting of a blockade that has been in place against the Palestinian region of Gaza for quite some time.
Is there any hope in this region? I mean, my entire life, it has been a series of these kind of ramping up and then coming back down a little bit and then ramping back up. There never seems to be any resolution. I go back to the Carter years where they had everybody holding hands, everything was wonderful, and all of this stuff, it never seems to get anywhere.
No, it doesn't, and that's frankly one of the more frustrating aspects of foreign policy, I guess. There's only so much that diplomacy and whatnot can solve, and no one's really seemed to find the sort of silver bullet here that would solve this continuing tinderbox of an issue. And I'd be doubtful to think that as good of a Secretary of State as John Kerry is, that it's going to be something that's going to resolve just kind of basic human animosity that's existed for years before this crisis even.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know that us being involved in it, I don't know that does any good on either side.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
No, and again, that's another hard part of this. It's always kind of hard to figure out how much support the U.S. should give to Israel. It's there's always there's pretty much actors on both sides of the situation that are not necessarily acting into stuff. That's sort of the conventional wisdom. And there's also a lot of people out there who are heavily invested in giving out misleading information. So it's kind of a hard issue to get a gut feeling on that you can really feel good about.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, when you've got I get people sending me all these videos, and I don't know if you've seen these. They're just heartbreaking. I mean, I've got 3 kids, 5, 8, and 12, and to see the bodies of these children on either side, bombed and blown. Something's got to stop.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move to another border. And speaking of, I look at the people in Vassar, Michigan, who wanted to put landmines on our border, and I don't know that we're much better than what's going on over there. What's going on with our border now?
Right now we have, as I mentioned, Congress getting ready to leave, but the Republicans are attempting to pass some sort of last-minute legislation before they leave town to help deal with the humanitarian crisis currently on the border. They're seeking a little bit less than $1 billion, according to a number of reports that we've seen, to deal with the border situation, to bring in more judges and whatnot. And meanwhile, we also have Democrats pursuing a $2.2 billion resolution in the Senate. And both of those are, of course, significantly below the $3.7 billion initially requested by the administration to deal with this.
Okay, and what is that? What's that going to get us?
That's a very good question. It's probably going to be, of course, the reading between the lines right here is it means that nothing's really going to be done before they leave for 5 weeks, and as a result, we're pretty much going to be left with the border that's not being properly tended to, and young children who are not receiving the immediate legal recourse that many people believe that they're absolutely entitled to.
Well, and the other part of this is, it's interesting to me to see all of the same actors who helped pass the law that would guarantee these kids to come. They're the ones who are out there screaming at the loudest that they shouldn't be coming. It was their idea.
Mm-hmm. No, that's certainly true. This is, of course, a 2008 law that was passed hastily during the final days of the Bush administration, and nobody could really predict that this was going to lead to the situation that ultimately did lead to, and as a result, we're kind of left with a heartbreaking situation on our hands.
Yeah, it's a horrible situation. As a parent, I can't imagine, sending my kids, a couple of 100,000 miles away or whatever, in the hopes that maybe possibly that our government would do the right thing.
No, of course, and that's that's really why this is so heartbreaking, and also why you really need the the additional legal recourses for those pursuing amnesty. If you are, as a parent, are willing to send your children off into sort of the great unknown in the direction of America, then that pretty much signals that the conditions are probably pretty bad back home, and it's just rough.
Yeah, it's insane to me. And the other part of this is, if we wanted to spend resources, why don't we spend resources trying to clean those areas up so that people could stay home? I mean, if we're really going to take these problems on, then why not try and solve the root problem? Because that seems to be the real problem in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ellen actually has been put forward a column today that I'm going to shamelessly promote because she's my boss, where she noted that if we halted the drug war and or maybe took on a more realistic approach to that, we'd have a situation where we'd have a lot more money to use for foreign aid to use for tourism or education or other aspects to try to mitigate the economic and human rights situation on the ground, and we could kind of stem the tide of immigrants that way. But it doesn't really look like there's much of an appetite for that on the right now. And instead, we're just getting the typical calls for additional border security and deportation.
Bigger fences and bigger dogs and landmines. I still, for the life of me, I still can't imagine someone actually said that. We should have landmines on the border. I guess I've just been fixated on that.
Yeah, I actually don't have the quote for who said that exactly, but anybody who has any sort of inkling of the human rights, or not human rights, just the basic moral quandary that comes with landmines and kind of the devastation that comes with that, would obviously not even joke about that.
Yeah, good point. I understand a new VA plan has been announced, not yet unfurled, but there's a plan, I guess.
Well, this was unveiled today by Senator Bernie Sanders, as well as Representative Jeff Miller, the chairman and the chairman of the Senate and House on Veterans Affairs committees, respectively. And this is something that will provide about $17 billion in emergency funds for the VA, and it will also allow those within the VA system to receive a special card that they can use to apply for care outside of the typical VA system at other institutions that provide federally approved healthcare services for Medicaid dollars and whatnot. If they do not receive an appointment within 14 days of requesting one, or if they live more than 40 miles away from a VA center. So this means that they could be going to, Medicare providers or DOD facilities, or even tribal, medical facilities on, federal tribal lands. So this is a pretty big shift today. It's one of the, first steps in reforming the VA coming from the congressional side of things. And it's certainly being a welcome step, and it's one of those rare moments of bipartisanship in D.C.
Yeah, well, I mean, because I think everybody, I don't know that this is a partisan issue. I think everyone agrees that if you're going to put these people up on pedestals and call them heroes and send them off into harm, we should at least take care of them.
No, absolutely, and that's one of those things that has sort of been the dark irony of this whole VA scandal. These are people who politicians pay quite a bit of lip service to. And the fact that this situation was allowed to unfurl as it did without, anybody really putting on the brakes just speaks volumes about how the country treats its service members.
Yeah, because I remember when we went into Iraq, the first thing I said, and Afghanistan, I just don't want to see those guys like I did when I was a kid when they were coming back from Vietnam, who were just dumped into our neighborhood. because truthfully, I have a very jaded view of our military because of, as a kid, what I saw. Anytime I saw one of those heavy green Army coats, it was somebody whose body, mind were broken, or they were hooked to some drug, alcohol, whatever. These were broken people, and they were just they were everywhere in my neighborhood. And I swore that I never wanted to see that. I don't want my kids to see that. I don't want anyone's kids to go through that.
No, and that's was sort of the fear that accompanied a lot of this. There was a lot of lip service trying to convince Americans that this time was going to be different. But it was pretty apparent that the system in place did not really transform with the new batch of veterans that came home.
Yeah. Also, a court in Virginia struck down the gay marriage ban. Another one? Virginia? Really?
Yeah, no, Virginia of all places, which of course was one of the heated battlegrounds for this for quite some time. It looks like this was struck down by I believe, a federal judge today. I don't have his name exactly in front of me right now. But this is, certainly big news and just joins the sort of tidal waves of states that we've seen taking, similar steps to try to ensure marriage equality. So, big day in Virginia, our neighbor here in D.C., and it looks like it's going to be signaling probably quite likely a court battle going on over there, and some more future actions to be taken eventually at the Supreme Court level.
There you go. And finally, it appears another poll out, CNN and ORC has a poll out that says that Mitt Romney would beat Obama. Aren't we done? Isn't that over? Was this election been over for a while?
Yeah, it certainly has. But of course, there's been some within, maybe not within the party, but just probably within the Romney camp itself, who are dedicated to trying to ensure the possibility of a Romney candidacy, the third one in 2016. And this sort of fuels that fire, even though, nobody thinks that this is a realistic possibility. But also the, interesting aspect of this, there's never really going to be a rematch, despite this ORC question, was that it showed that Romney ended up being beaten handily by Hillary Clinton by about 55% for Hillary Clinton to 44% to Romney. So it shows even if he does run, he's not going to be seen as the sort of winner here.
Yeah, I hope he does run. I would like to see 2012 all over again.
I'm sure you would. I mean, just the fact that he, even after the election, continued to make sort of embarrassing gaffes. The fact that he was caught again after he had finished running, going on a conference call and accusing Democrats of giving out gifts in language strikingly similar to his 47% remarks, shows that he probably hasn't necessarily yet learned how to run for president despite plenty of practice.
You mean the Urbans?
I think that was Paul Ryan who said that.
No, but it was the both of them. I mean, they were both saying it was.
Yeah.
It was Paul Ryan, but it was them. I consider them a team. I'd love to see them back. I'd love to see part 2.
I'm sure a lot of people would feel the same way for a variety of reasons. But I guess we just have to wait and see how the field turns out.
There you go, Justin. Always great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. You have a good night.
You too. Justin Duckham, Talk Radio News Service. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Have you noticed that the powers that be employ an entirely different standard for measuring the health of America's job market than they use for the stock market? They're currently telling us that the job market is improving. What do they mean? Simply that the economy is generating an increase in the number of jobs available for workers. But when they say the stock market is improving, they don't mean that the number of stocks available to investors is on the rise. Instead, they're measuring the price, the value of the stocks. And isn't value what really counts in both cases? As a worker, you don't merely want to know that 200,000 new jobs are on the market, but what they're worth. Do they pay living wages? Do they come with benefits? Are they just part-time and temporary? Do they include union rights? What are the working conditions, etc.? In other words, are these jobs or scams? So it's interesting that the recent news of job market improvement doesn't mention that of the 10 occupation categories projecting the greatest growth in the next 8 years, only 1 pays a middle-class wage. 4 pay barely above the poverty level, and 5 pay beneath it, including fast food workers, retail sales staff, health aides, and janitors. The job expected to have the highest number of openings is personal care, taking care of aging baby boomers in their houses or in nursing homes. The median salary of an aide is under $20,000. They enjoy no benefits, and about 40% of them must rely on food stamps and Medicaid to make ends meet. Plus, many are in the, quote, shadow economy, vulnerable to being cheated on their already miserly wages. This is Jim Hightower saying, to measure the job market by quantity with no regard for quality is to devalue workers themselves. Creating 200,000 new jobs is not a sign of economic health if each worker needs 2 or 3 of those jobs to patch together a bare-bones living.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Would you dive 14 feet deep in the Susquehanna to keep a bridge safe? Would you spend night after night with prisoners to keep your community safe? Would you spend Christmas Eve plowing snow to keep roads safe? AFSCME members do. Men and women who choose to serve in public service. Mine inspectors, 911 dispatchers, healthcare workers, parole agents. You may not think about them, but no, they're all thinking about you. This message brought to you by AFSCME Council 13.
Your proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Jim sent me an email here during the break. Asked the question. Since I brought up earlier that the studies that show that on the ideological side, and these studies didn't say the same about liberals or folks on the left. And Jimmy asked the question quite simply. Is it only conservatives or is it all people? Do we as a species, do we as humanity tend to hold our views close at heart? And I don't think so. Jim, you look at the studies that I've read, and I'm sure there may be one out there that says liberals might be the same way. I don't think so, because the way I see it is most people who call themselves liberals try to at least have some intellectual basis for their arguments. And the people who I know who call themselves liberals actually have some pride in saying, if I'm wrong, and you show me the evidence, then obviously I'm wrong, and that's the way I'll start thinking. Now, the evidence has got to be accurate, and it's got to be right. And I would assume that Jim, I would assume conservatives who have the I believe syndrome, that they would argue the same kind of thing. So, these studies to me are interesting in that, you talk to people and get their thought process. And, I've had a number of these conversations where the statement, well, we'll just agree to disagree. Well, no, you just don't go, no, that's not how things work. You generally try and figure stuff out. And what's going on is we have very ingrained kind of belief structures that unless we're willing to at some point say, I believe, but I might be wrong, I don't think anything changes. If someone were to show me that, and Jimmy brings this up later in his email, my belief that labor unions are good for workers. If you show me something else, you show me something that gives people a set of rights, gives them security, You know, I've often said that I don't know what the future of organized labor, I don't know what the future of labor, I don't know what the future of workers in this country is. Is it the old trade union model where each craft has its own guild, association, or unions? Is it the the 50s and 60s model of collective bargaining where it's each individual place, maybe a couple of nationwide contracts if you can get them? Is it the German model of labor councils to where each employer there's an association or a labor council there where the workers and management work together to make that company the best it could possibly be and crush all others? Is it the French version where you don't really have members per se? They're more like the NRA. Is that the future? Is the future these micro unions that the Chamber of Commerce is afraid of? That in each workplace you can have 4 or 5 unions, which is interesting that the Chamber of Commerce would be against this, because the guy who's the head of the Tea Party think tank over here at the Commonwealth Foundation, he has told me over the years on a number of occasions that he's not anti-union. In fact, he thinks there should be more unions. Everybody should have a union. There should be 5 or 6 unions in a workplace, because what he knows is you could pit them against each other. They're easy to pit against each other. The problem is in places that don't have unions at all, if you start giving individual places that, then that begins to build unions. So when it's about tearing unions down and working conditions down, they're all in favor of more. But when it's about raising things up, they're against that. And I guess that's the difference in the push-pull that I see in the right-left politics, that I see in the corporate, the capitalist politic. It's that, which direction are you talking about the push and pull? Are you talking about the Rendell years or the Corbett years, where Rendell was fighting for education spending to increase so that you were making investments in the future, as where you've got Corbett, who has been trying to destroy it, in my view, and going the other way. And this whole line item veto of the General Assembly, portions of the General Assembly budget, to kind of fight over this budget, really? A bad, horrible budget? It kind of takes me back, which direction? Which direction do we go in this? And for me, that push and pull, I'm always going to side on what benefits the little guy, the worker in this case, the student, who fights for them. And I guess that's part of, maybe it's a character flaw. I don't know. I like to fight for the guy who's the underdog. Even when I watch sports, if it's not a team that I'm terribly inclined for, whoever the one who's it would be a big victory for them. That's who I'm going to root for. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a character flaw. I don't know. But if you look at in the work world, where workers have really no rights, or once you cross that threshold and you punch that time clock, you're somebody else's. You can't leave without their permission. You're on private property. You have no rights. You can't close your lunchbox. Everything you send out an email is not yours. You're their tool. You're their property. And every day we seem to be giving more and more power and more rights back to the employer. Now look, are there some good employers? Damn right there are. Are there some really bad ones? Absolutely. But the reality is all of them at one point or another can be bad. I think about my uncle owns an electrical supply company, pretty good sized one in Ohio. And he's now retiring. He was a good guy to work for. Everybody who I know, everybody says he was a great guy. His kids are now taking over, and his kids are horrible. Everybody that I've talked to, they're tyrants. And they're so grateful now that they organized years ago, so they don't have those problems. So I don't know what the future looks like, Jim. I'm not sure what the answer to those questions are, but we will continue to explore them and continue to talk about how we make things better. And from the union side, I'm not really sure how things are going forward. I just know that people organizing never goes out of vogue. and that the more we get people together, like we did this past weekend, some 1,500 people in Chicago who made their way for the first fast food convention, that can only help. That can only help us. Pretty simple stuff. Anyway, if you've missed any portion of the program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on your smartphone. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com. See you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's color like time flood beneath the lunar sway, imperial, mysterious, in amorous array. Democracy is coming to the USA.
We see the storm out on the horizon. The clouds grow dark in the midnight sky. We feel the fire burning in the belly. The flame leaps out with an angry cry. From the underground where the night is endless. From the mine and rig where our work is done. From every plant and every nation we cry. We are many, we are one. Power, there is power in the union. Power, there is power in our hands. Power, we stand and fight together. There's power in a union of many lands. Power, come and reach across the borders. Power, come and open up your eyes. Power, when we stand and fight together. There's power when we organize.